Chapter 46-45. The birthday party was scheduled for 3 days later. These days, Lin Yi did nothing but report to the island owner's summer palace on time at dawn. Every day he stayed in the research room with Han Jingjing, Shanghai Laner, and Ning Xuefei to tinker. This semi-finished automatic casting mechanism was very important to him and the King of Junk. Although the electronic components were not in place yet, it didn't mean that they couldn't do anything. Casting was painstaking work, and making this kind of automatic casting mechanism was even more painstaking work. Every part was worth considering and improving. Of course, Han Jingjing and Ning Xuefei were the main force to do these things. Lin Yi and Shanghai Laner were just helping them. Lin Yi, a dabbler in casting, could be of some use, and Shanghai Laner was just joining in the fun. As for little Curly Bear, he was directly sent to the outer room by them. It would be lucky if he didn't make trouble for them. 3 days passed peacefully. On this day, the long-awaited birthday party finally arrived. It was not just a birthday but Ning Xuefei's 18th birthday. It was a grand festival that belonged to the whole West Island. Although Ning Xuefei was the princess of West Island, it was just an ordinary birthday, so there was no need to make such a big fuss. At most, Shanghai Laner would bring 2 master guards to the North Island, but there was no need to send such a big delegation. The island owner's summer palace was decorated with lanterns and streamers, and everyone was beaming with joy. They gathered in the Intercontinental Banquet Hall in the center of the palace. This was the largest banquet hall in West Island, a sacred and solemn place since ancient times. It was only opened on grand festivals, and Ning Xuefei's coming-of-age ceremony was certainly no less important than any festivals. There was still some time before the birthday party officially began, but Lin Yi arrived at the Intercontinental Banquet Hall in advance. After entering, he found that it was divided into several areas, and each area had clear text labels. The largest area here was naturally the guest area of West Island. In addition, there were Central Island, North Island, South Island, and even East Island. Among the 5 major islands of heaven rank, the East Continent was a high and aloof place. Generally, only people from other heaven rank islands would go to the East Continent to visit, but very few people from the East Continent would come out to support them. It could be seen that although the people from the West Island were all female cultivators, their strength and connections were not to be underestimated. But this only surprised Lin Yi a little, not too much. After all, West Island was the overlord of a region, and it wasn't strange for them to have this kind of foundation. However, when Lin Yi saw another district sign, he suddenly froze. There were 2 words written on this sign, South Island. Lin Yi couldn't help looking back at the previous sign that said South Island. Wasn't there already South Island? How could there be a separate South Island? Is it? Lin Yi suddenly thought of a possibility. South Island and South Island seemed to be the same place, but strictly speaking, they actually represented completely different meanings. South Island was a general name for South Island and the surrounding sea area of South Island. There were a large number of human cultivators here, but South Island was the base camp of the Single-Finger Spirit Beast clan. At this moment, not only Lin Yi but also the ghost thing couldn't help but be a little shocked. It seemed that this time, not only human cultivators from the sea area of South Island came to West Island, but also the Spirit Beast clan? Didn't the Spirit Beast clan always have nothing to do with human cultivators? How could they have such a friendship with West Island? Lin Yi and the ghost thing were full of doubts, but they had no one to ask at this time. The girls who had been staying together before were not around. Needless to say, Ning Xuefei was the protagonist of this birthday party, and she was busy dressing up at the moment. As her best friends, Han Jingjing and Shanghai Laner naturally accompanied her at this time, so now only Lin Yi was alone. The standard of this birthday party was far larger than expected. It seemed that all the elites of the 5 islands of Heavenly Stage would be gathered. It was the first time for Lin Yi to attend this kind of banquet so he could broaden his horizons. After walking around, Lin Yi found a seat in North Island and waited for the birthday party to officially start. After about half an hour, the gate of the Intercontinental Banquet Hall was bustling, and all the guests from the 5 islands of Heavenly Stage finally entered one after another. Lin Yi raised his head and glanced at them, then closed his eyes again. At this time, those who entered were not powerful figures, so naturally there was nothing to see. Those real big shots, because of their status, had to appear at the end of the birthday party. But what made Lin Yi feel a little confused was that although the big shots hadn't appeared yet, people in all the districts had been seated one after another, except for South Island, which was empty without a single person. After another moment, a large group of female guards suddenly rushed in from the gate, and the atmosphere of the scene became hot in an instant. The protagonist appeared. Surrounded by these women, Lin Yi saw Ning Xuefei at a glance. Although this girl was the princess of West Island, her previous dress was not much different from that of ordinary people. But today was different. Today was her big day. Even if she was unwilling, she had to dress up carefully. Even Lin Yi, who had been familiar with her at this moment, suddenly saw such a beautiful and delicate Ning Xuefei at this moment. He couldn't help but be amazed. She was really a heavenly beauty. At this time, Han Jingjing and Shangguan Laner were also accompanying Ning Xuefei. Standing together, the three women each had their own merits, causing all the guests to be amazed, and they couldn't help but sigh. There was actually such a stunning beauty in the world, and this trip was really not in vain. Although the three women suddenly attracted everyone's attention, there was another woman beside them who was not inferior to them at all. This woman had the appearance and temperament of 30 years old, and her eyebrows were 70% similar to Ning Xuefei's, but her graceful and noble air was far from comparable to Ning Xuefei's. Ning Xuefei and the others were stunning, but this woman was shocking. Between her frown and smile, there was a compelling heroic spirit, making people unconsciously want to surrender under the hem of her skirt. Seeing this woman's first reaction, Lin Yi actually thought of the legendary Empress Wu Zetian in the secular world. This woman was one of the few top big shots in the 5 Heaven Stage Islands, the West Island Lord Ning Shangling, who controlled an island force alone. This was the first time that Lin Yi saw this legendary West Island Lord. Before this, he had a lot of conjectures in his heart, but at this moment, after seeing the real person, he knew that his conjectures were too small. This was a peerless beauty, but she was definitely not just a woman. Chapter 46-46. Ning Shangling glanced at the audience with a smile, and then led Ning Xuefei and the others to the main seat in the center. There were 5 elegant phoenix chairs of different sizes. Ning Shangling sat in the middle, Yan Xinlan, the deputy island master, sat on her right, and Ning Xuefei on her left. Shanghai Laner and Han Jingjing also had their own special seats. The host had already taken her seat, which meant that the birthday banquet had officially begun. At this moment, all the big shots from the 5 Heaven Rank Islands finally showed up one after another, and came to offer gifts to celebrate the birthday. What Lin Yi didn't expect was that among these people, he actually found a few acquaintances. The first to appear was a big shot from Middle Island. He wasn't an ordinary sect, but the dignified deputy island master of Middle Island. However, it wasn't the will of heaven but Chu Wentian. Lin Yi wasn't familiar with this person and had only met him once. It was said that he had a good relationship with the will of heaven. Of course, this relationship was just good, and it was far from the point of advancing and retreating together. With Chu Wentian's identity, he came to congratulate West Island. After all, this was only Ning Xuefei's birthday banquet, not the birthday banquet of Ning Shangling, the island master of West Island. Middle Island specially sent such a deputy island master, and it was obvious that they wanted to express their goodwill. Chu Wentian presented a sincere gift, and after exchanging a few words with Ning Shangling in public, he went to the VIP area of Middle Island and sat down. After him, the big shots from East Continent came in. Of course, the mysterious and vast East Continent didn't have an island master, and it was impossible for them to send a big shot with the same status as Chu Wentian. After all, it wouldn't be a surprise but a shock. East Continent's status had always been extremely aloof, and it had never established diplomatic relations with the other Heaven Rank Islands. The guest from the Eastern Continent this time was the Eastern Continent's Morning Pride Golden Female Academy's Deputy Dean, Lu Ziyu. From the name, it was obvious that it was similar to the Morning Star Academy he had seen before. After all, they were both Golden Rank Academies, but the difference was that this was a female academy. As the name implied, it only accepted females, and was similar to those female academies in the secular world. Although the dean and vice dean of any academy in the Eastern Continent couldn't be said to have monstrous power and influence in the Eastern Continent, if they came out from the other Heaven Stage Islands, they would be major characters equivalent to Vice Island Masters. The reverence that everyone present showed towards this Vice Dean Lu Ziyu was not the slightest bit inferior to Chu Wentian. Lu Ziyu had also given her a great gift. She seemed to have quite a good personal relationship with Ning Shangling. This could be seen from the way the two of them spoke. It was no wonder that she would specially rush over from so far away to attend Ning Xuefei's birthday banquet. Lin Yi even speculated that Ning Xuefei would very likely go to the Eastern Continent's Morning Pride Golden Female Academy to further her studies in the future. This was an unwritten rule among almost all the major factions on the various Heaven Stage Islands. Core disciples, especially successors, had to have the qualifications to study in the Eastern Continent's Island Master. This was not only for the sake of increasing one's strength, but also to broaden one's horizons. More importantly, It was to use this opportunity to rope in the major characters of the Eastern continent. Even if they couldn't become allies, they definitely couldn't become enemies. Otherwise, Ning Xuefei might not be able to sit firmly on the position of West Island Master in the future. Chu Wendian represented the Middle Island, while Lu Ziyu represented the Eastern continent. After these two major characters, the one who came with the congratulatory gift was the representative of the Southern continent. After clearly seeing who it was, Lin Yi was instantly surprised and delighted. Compared to the two before him, this representative from the Southern continent was really not considered a major character. Many people only glanced at him and didn't pay him any attention. However, Lin Yi was different because this was an old acquaintance of his. Qi Wenhan, the young master of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, represents the Southern Continent's Escort Agency Alliance to congratulate Miss Ning on her birthday. Qi Wenhan strode forward with his head held high, and presented his gift in a loud and clear voice. Seeing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a little excited. He really didn't expect the representative of the Southern Continent to be Qi Wenhan. However, when he thought about it, although this was unexpected, it was also reasonable. The Southern Continent's Escort Agency Alliance was the representative of the Southern Continent's Sea region, and the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was now the overlord of the Southern Continent's escort agencies. It could be said that it was reasonable for him to represent the Southern Continent. This time it wasn't Qi Ziyuan who came, but Qi Wenhan. The other meaning behind this was probably to take this opportunity to let Qi Wenhan build more connections, so that it would be convenient for him to take over the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency in the future. Lin Yi looked at Qi Wenhan from afar. Of course, when old friends met, they should get together and have a good chat. However, his current seat was a little far, and the guest areas of the North Island and the Southern Continent weren't next to each other, so Qi Wenhan couldn't see him at all. He had to find a chance later to catch up. After Qi Wenhan took his seat, the next person to present his gift was Lan Tiefu. As a disciple of the Shanghai Tianhua of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, he presented Ning Xuefei an expensive gift on behalf of the North Island. Although the official special envoy of the North Island this time was Lin Yi, his status was obviously not enough. After all the people who came this time were big shots. Even Qi Wenhan had the chance to take over the Southern Continent's escort agency in the future. On the North Island side, only Lan Tiefu or Ram Jie could come forward to control the situation. This time it was Lan Tiefu who came forward, which meant that Ram Jie had no interest in this kind of thing. With his aloof personality, he really didn't like this kind of work. Moreover, the two of them were ordered to protect Shanghai Laner in secret. Now that Lan Tiefu showed up in public, Ram Jie couldn't show up even more. After Lan Tiefu, the guests from the Central Island, the East Island, the South Island, and the North Island had taken their seats one after another. Everyone turned their eyes to the door, whispering to each other. At this time, only the South Island was left. They didn't know which spirit beast clan, which had never contacted the outside world, would send a gift to the Princess of West Island this time. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, the atmosphere was slightly stagnant for a moment. Suddenly at the door, a figure strode in with majestic gait, looking around and flying. In an instant he became the focus of the whole audience. Even the protagonists like Ning Shangling and Ning Xuefei were overshadowed by him. Everyone couldn't help but think of one word in their hearts. Who is this master of the Spirit Beast clan? The Spiritual Beast clan had never had any contact with the outside world, so there were only a few high-ranking members that the world was familiar with. However, the person who had appeared this time was an extremely unfamiliar face to everyone. Everyone discussed spiritedly, who was this expert from the Spiritual Beast clan? He can't be just an ordinary minion, right? Isn't that a public provocation? Even as powerful as the Spirit Beast clan, they may not have the guts to casually provoke West Island, right? While people were still talking, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel nervous when he saw this figure. Others didn't know this guy, but Lin Yi had seen him once when he accidentally broke into the Spirit Beast conference, and he definitely had a deep impression of him. This master who represented the Spirit Beast clan of South Island was actually the new Azure Dragon. Chapter 46-47. Lin Yi couldn't help swallowing his saliva secretly. The unforgettable experience in the South Island last time made him deeply understand the power and horror of the Spirit Beast clan. This Azure Dragon was a horrible existence at the same level as Vermilion Bird, and he was at least a master of the sea-splitting stage. Lin Yi didn't know whether there were other masters of the sea-splitting stage present, nor did he know the strength of Ning Shangling, the owner of West Island. But at least he could be sure that in terms of strength alone, this new Azure Dragon was at least in the top 3. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to overtake the host with only his fierce momentum. Azure Dragon, the elder of the Spirit Beast clan of the South Island, congratulates Miss Ning on her birthday on behalf of the king. Although Azure Dragon's momentum was astonishing, his words were not out of line. After giving out the generous gifts, he immediately went to the VIP area of the South Island to take his seat. This could not help but make those who were prepared to watch the show disappointed. They had thought that the spirit beasts were unruly and unruly. Why were they so disciplined? If Azure Dragon knew what people were thinking at this moment, he would definitely laugh 3 times. The Spirit Beast clan was indeed unruly, but they were not fools. This time, they specially came out to attend the birthday party of the Princess of West Island to get close to her, so that it would be convenient for them to do things in the future. They didn't come out to find enemies. Everyone looked at Azure Dragon from afar. At this moment, there was no one around him, nor was there any attendant. It seemed that he was the only one from the Spirit Beast clan of the South Island. But even so, with this guy's strength and status, it was enough to show that the Spirit Beast clan attached great importance to the West Island. Obviously, the West Island also knew the news in advance. Otherwise, it would be impossible to prepare the VIP area of the South Island in advance. It was just that they didn't expect that Azure Dragon would come alone. Azure Dragon sat in the VIP area of the South Island and glanced at the audience. If it were someone else, he would feel a little unnatural to be the center of attention, no matter how good his psychological quality was, but he didn't feel it at all. On the contrary, those who were glanced at by him unconsciously withdrew their gazes. There was no other reason. This guy's momentum and deterrence were too terrible. People who were slightly weaker would have a nervous breakdown after being glanced at by him, and it was possible that they would be scared to pee on the spot. Who dared to look at such a monster? Lin Yi also lowered his head nervously. It was not that he was afraid of looking into the Azure Dragon's eyes, but he was afraid of being recognized by the Azure Dragon. Although their appearances were different, it was difficult to associate him with the appearance of the Azure Dragon when he had barged into the Spiritual Beast Conference. However, this Azure Dragon was at least at the sea-splitting stage. Who knew what kind of heaven-shaking and earth-shattering divine abilities he had? Lin Yi was still feeling a lingering fear. Lin Yi was lowering his head when he suddenly felt 2 sharp gazes behind him. He was shocked. However, when he turned around, he discovered that the 2 gazes belonged to Lan Chefu and Ramjie. Lan Chefu sat not far from Lin Yi, while Ramjie sat alone in an inconspicuous corner in order to fool others. At this moment, the 2 of them were not looking at Lin Yi, but at the Azure Dragon through him. It could be seen that both Lan Chefu and Ramjie were interested in this new Azure Dragon. They were the higher-ups of the 3 pavilions on the North Island. Azure Dragon had suddenly appeared in the world on behalf of the Spiritual Beast clan, and no one knew what would happen next. Therefore, this matter would inevitably attract the attention of all human forces. The 2 of them had to find out the details of Azure Dragon, so that the 3 pavilions on the North Island could prepare countermeasures in advance. Just as Lin Yi was secretly speculating, he suddenly felt an extremely terrifying gaze. Lin Yi suddenly felt a chill in his heart. This gaze did not carry any oppressive aura, but the simple pressure of the gaze made his hair stand on end. This feeling could no longer be described as terrifying, but only as terrifying. Lin Yi turned around subconsciously, and sure enough, the owner of this gaze was Azure Dragon. However, Azure Dragon was not looking at him at the moment, but at Lan Chefu and Ramjie. This was clearly a counterattack against the 2 of them who were staring at him. Lin Yi's interest was piqued when he saw this. There was no doubt that the new Azure Dragon was powerful, and Ramjie and Lan Chefu were also people with unfathomable strength. He wondered what the outcome of their secret confrontation would be. Lin Yi initially thought that this confrontation of gazes would last for a while, but to his great surprise, Ramjie was obviously unable to hold on after only a short while. He withdrew his gaze somewhat awkwardly, and Lan Chefu quickly withdrew his gaze as well. Azure Dragon was the only one who still maintained an extremely aggressive gaze. However, when he looked at Lan Chefu and Ramjie again, there was an obvious hint of contempt in his eyes. Lin Yi was shocked at once. Given Azure Dragon's strength, it was not surprising that he could have the last laugh. What surprised him was that Ramjie, the number 1 person among the new generation in the North Island, was actually so weak in front of Azure Dragon. Although Lan Chefu was suspected of deliberately withdrawing his gaze, he probably would not be able to hold on for long. At the end of the day, although Lan Chefu and Ramjie were powerful, that was only relative to the younger generation of experts. There was still a big gap between them and the true top-notch existences. It was obvious that the new Azure Dragon of the Spirit Beast clan was a veteran expert whom they could not contend with at the moment. At this point, Lin Yi initially thought that this matter would come to an end. However, to his surprise, Azure Dragon suddenly stood up and walked straight toward the North Island's VIP area, attracting everyone's attention at once. Seeing Azure Dragon striding over, Lin Yi was at a loss for words. Although this newly appointed elder of the spiritual beast clan was powerful, his tolerance was a little too low. He had only been glanced at by Lan Qiafu and Guang Jie, yet he was trying to cause trouble for them in front of everyone? However, to Lin Yi's surprise, after Azure Dragon arrived at the North Island's VIP area, he did not look for Lan Qiafu and Ram Jie. He did not even look at them. Instead, he stopped directly in front of himself. Looking at Azure Dragon's half-smile face to face, Lin Yi hurriedly stood up. He could not help but feel his scalp tingle. Could he have discovered my identity? Ha, nice to meet you, Special Envoy Lin. I've heard about your heroic deeds in Southland. You're really young and promising, Azure Dragon suddenly said with a smile. What? Heard about my heroic deeds in Southland? Hearing this, Lin Yi was so scared that he almost turned around and ran. Any normal person would have been scared to the point of going insane. Does this mean that he has seen through my identity? Chapter 46-48. Haha, Special Envoy Lin, you don't have to be surprised. Although I'm in the South Island, I know everything about South Continent. Azure Dragon still had a smile on his face, and it seemed that he really didn't mean to hurt Lin Yi. Lin Yi let out a breath of relief. Southern Continent and Southern Island were only one word apart, but the difference in Azure Dragon's words was huge. If he'd said Southern Island, then Lin Yi would have known for sure that he'd been recognized. But now that he'd said Southern Continent, then it had to be about the Guizhou Escort Agency Festival. Elder Azure Dragon, you flatter me. I'm just doing my friend a favor. It's a piece of cake, Lin Yi said lightly. Your piece of cake is a legend for those people in South Continent. Are you saying that they are too weak or that you are too strong? Azure Dragon smiled non-committally. Without waiting for Lin Yi's answer, he continued, I'll also visit North Island in the future. I hope Special Envoy Lin can introduce me to you. After saying this, Azure Dragon ignored the surprised eyes of Lin Yi and other people and turned back to the VIP area of South Island alone. What on earth is this guy up to? Lin Yi's mind was full of doubts at the moment. He didn't know why Azure Dragon suddenly came to him, and he didn't know why this guy said these words. What was the deep meaning behind it? It was really confusing. Lin Yi was puzzled and everyone else present was even more baffled. The Azure Dragon elder of the Spirit Beast clan was actually trying to strike up a conversation with a young disciple from the Northern Island's Clear Cloud Pavilion. This kind of thing was simply incomprehensible. No matter how you looked at it, the difference between them was just too big. Because of Azure Dragon, Lin Yi had become the focus of the audience at this time. Qi Wenhan, who hadn't noticed him before, was suddenly surprised and happy. He never dreamed that he would meet Lin Yi in West Island. If it weren't for the fact that his every move represented the South Continent Sea, and if it weren't for the fact that this occasion was too important and sensitive, Qi Wenhan would definitely rush over and give Lin Yi a bear hug. But now, he could only suppress his excitement and wave at Lin Yi from afar. Lin Yi quickly noticed this scene. He immediately threw Azure Dragon to the back of his mind and gestured to Qi Wenhan, indicating that after the birthday banquet ended, they would find a time to have a proper gathering. While Lin Yi and Qi Wenhan greeted each other. At this moment, Lan Qiafu and Ram Jie, who were also sitting in the VIP area of the Northern Island, could not help but fall into deep thought. They stared at Azure Dragon's back as if they wanted to see through him completely. What the Azure Dragon said to Lin Yi just now was clearly heard by both of them. This was a huge incident that had to be reported to the higher-ups immediately. Azure Dragon's sudden appearance to attend the birthday banquet of the Princess of West Island was already very suspicious. Now he even said that he was going to visit the Northern Island. What was the Spirit Beast clan going to do? How could he come out and walk around? Was he going to publicly break the agreement signed by the Spirit Beast King and the Human Alliance? A large part of the reason why the 5 Heaven-rank islands were able to maintain peace all these years was because of this treaty. Otherwise, with the estrangement between the Spirit Beasts and human cultivators, a war could break out at any time. That would be a huge matter. The banquet continued. But everyone's eyes were still unconsciously fixed on the VIP area of the Southern Island. The impact of Azure Dragon on them was too great. Although he came to congratulate the Princess of West Island, everyone could clearly see the restlessness of the Spirit Beast clan from his action. Maybe this was a sign that the Spirit Beast clan was going to go out of the Southern Island. Thinking of this, everyone shuddered with fear. There was no doubt that the Spirit Beast clan was powerful and terrible, but they never went out of the southern island, so human cultivators could sit back and relax. But now, once the Spirit Beast clan was going to come out, it would definitely bring a big change to the 5 Heaven Stage Islands. Even if they didn't start a war. But wherever they went, the hidden threat they brought to human beings was enough to change the general trend. The 5 Heaven Stage Islands that had been peaceful for many years were bound to rise again. Maybe it would be another super chaotic world. Thank you for coming all the way here to support us. Today is my daughter's 18th birthday. It's also a rare day for West Island. On behalf of all the sisters in West Island, I thank you here. After Ning Shangling said this, everyone looked away from Azure Dragon, and the banquet finally returned to its normal rhythm. For my daughter's birthday, let's raise our glasses together and drink up the wine in our glasses. No one will go back tonight. Ning Shangling smiled and raised her glass. Drink up the wine in our glasses, no one will go back tonight. Everyone echoed in unison in high spirits, and the originally somewhat depressing atmosphere was instantly stirred up. Everyone raised their glasses high and drained them in one gulp. Although Ning Shangling was a woman, women in West Island couldn't be judged by common sense. Not to mention that she, the owner of West Island, was noble and cold when she was quiet, graceful when she was enthusiastic, and her every move on this occasion was even more magnificent. As the owner of an island, she actually came down to toast in person. From the beginning to the end, she went to every VIP area and drank up the wine in one gulp. The whole audience roared and applauded. Sure enough, women were not inferior to men. Ning Shangling came out for a toast, and Ning Xuefei naturally had to follow her. She had the demeanor of a mother in a situation like this, and her drinking was clean and neat as well. Even Linny was a little surprised. Was this girl trained since she was young? Wherever Ning Shangling and Ning Xuefei went, they naturally became the unique focus of the whole audience. This time, when they walked to the VIP area of the North Island, they deliberately stopped in front of Linny. Although they were toasting to all the guests from the North Island, people with discerning eyes could see that there was obviously a deeper meaning. Feeling the strange eyes of the people, Linny couldn't help but secretly smile bitterly. Just now it was Azure Dragon and now it was Ning Shangling. She made him the focus of the whole audience twice. Did he activate the protagonist's halo today? Why did all the big shots come over? While toasting, Ning Xuefei blinked at Linny as if to express something, but Linny was confused. Although he was familiar with Ning Xuefei, they didn't have a tacit understanding to understand each other's thoughts with just a look. What did she mean? After the toast, as usual, Ning Shangling should immediately go to the next VIP area, but this time she unexpectedly stayed a little longer. She took a deep look at Linny and said with a smile, "You are Linny, right? Feifei has mentioned to me many times, thank you for taking care of me before." Chapter 46-49. Well, I hope you have the strength. Ning Shangling nodded slightly, then turned around and left. Ning Xuefei took a deep look at Linny, then followed her mother. Linny rubbed his head strangely. What did she mean by having the strength? Somehow he always felt that Ning Xuefei's eyes were a little strange, and he didn't know what they wanted to express. Ning Shangling and Ning Xuefei left, but Shanghai Laner and Han Jingjing stayed. Compared with following Ning Shangling to toast everywhere, they preferred to stay with Linny, which was much more comfortable. Do you two feel that Feifei's expression is a little strange? Linny couldn't help asking. Shanghai Laner and Han Jingjing had been staying with Ning Xuefei all the time, so they should know some inside information. Strange? No. The two women responded in unison. After being stunned for a while, Han Jingjing said thoughtfully, "But really, I think Feifei seems to have something on her mind, but she just doesn't want to tell us. She has always been like this. She looks careless, but if something really happens she will always handle it by herself, and will never take the initiative to tell us. I'm used to it." Shanghai Laner shook her head helplessly. Careless? Linny couldn't help glancing at Shanghai Laner. It seemed that she was the only one who could be described as this. Although Ning Xuefei's status was similar to hers, their situations were actually quite different. Shanghai Laner was the apple of Shanghai Tianhua's eye. She had never felt any pressure since she was a child, and she had never said that she wanted to take over Soaring Pavilion. Besides, it was difficult for a woman to do that in the North Island, so she was so carefree. But Ning Xuefei was different. Although her character was similar to Shanghai Laner's, she was the future heir of West Island. It was absolutely deceiving herself to say that she had no pressure. No matter how tolerant Ning Shangling was to her, she would never relax her comprehensive training. The princess of West Island, who was raised in this kind of environment, must be a very persevering existence in her bones. Otherwise, how could she shoulder the whole West Island in the future? After 3 rounds of drinking, the atmosphere at the scene was completely on the right track. The masters from all walks of life, who were a little restrained before, obviously became more frequent with each other. Ning Xuefei's birthday party was just an excuse. The key reason why these big shots came to West Island from thousands of miles away was to build relationships. But in this situation, they not only had the opportunity to build a good relationship with West Island. You would also have the chance to get in touch with the other big shots of Heaven Stage Island. Under normal circumstances, there would not be so many important figures gathered together, especially the top-notch elders of the spirit beasts. When the atmosphere was in a good mood, Ning Shangling, who had returned to the main seat, suddenly stood up again. Everyone consciously quieted down at once. This was not only a courtesy to the host, but also a reverence to the owner of West Island. Even Azure Dragon, a spirit beast elder who was rebellious and had incredible strength, was afraid of Ning Shangling. At this moment, they all looked at Ning Shangling tactfully, waiting for her to speak. Friends from the 5 islands of Heavenly Stage, on behalf of the entire West Island, I would like to thank you again for coming. Taking advantage of this rare opportunity, I would like to announce an important thing to all of you. Ning Shangling's eyes slowly swept around the audience. Seeing that everyone was waiting, she continued to announce, as you all know, today is not only my daughter's 18th birthday, but also her coming-of-age ceremony. According to the rules of West Island, I will choose a husband for her. As soon as she said that, the audience suddenly burst into an uproar. Lin Yi and the others had never heard of this rule, so they were all shocked. But some people had prepared for it. Obviously, this was a traditional practice of West Island. Somehow, Lin Yi suddenly felt a little lost at this moment. Strictly speaking, his relationship with Ning Xuefei was actually limited to good friends, far from romantic love. But at this moment, when he suddenly heard that Ning Xuefei was going to get married, the feeling of emptiness in his heart was real. Lin Yi suddenly shook his head. Ning Xuefei was going to get married sooner or later. After all, she was the heir of West Island, and the choice of her husband was directly related to the overall situation and stability of the whole West Island. This kind of thing must be put on the agenda early, but he did not expect it to be so sudden. At this time, Han Jingjing seemed to know what was on Lin Yi's mind. She suddenly held Lin Yi's hand tightly, suddenly blinked her big watery eyes and said in a low voice, "Brother Lin Yi, Jingjing and Feifei are good friends, we don't want to be separated." "Yes, me too." Shanghai Laner also blurted out, but then she suddenly blushed. She felt something was wrong, so she quickly added, I mean we are going back to the North Island, and there is no chance to see each other. If Feifei gets married it will be even less. But as long as she marries junior brother, there will be no problem. In that case, even if she is the princess of West Island, she can often come to the North Island to play with us. Lin Yi was speechless for a while. Shanghai Laner was more straightforward than Han Jingjing. Just because they wanted more chances to be together, they urged him to pursue Ning Xuefei. The logic of these two girls was so simple and straightforward that it was cute. But they were too naive. Ning Xuefei was the princess of West Island, the person who was destined to take over the whole West Island in the future. Even if he really had this idea, it was definitely not an easy thing. No matter how much Ning Shangling doted on Ning Xuefei, on this kind of thing she had to consider the interests of the whole West Island first. There was no doubt that this was not the time for Ning Xuefei to pursue happiness. It was purely a marriage alliance. The person who could become the husband of the princess of West Island must either have the corresponding status or absolutely powerful strength. One must be one of the two. As for the current Lin Yi, in terms of strength he was only at the peak of the early stage of Yuanying realm, and in terms of status he was only the second senior brother of the inner core supervisor of Blue Cloud Pavilion. Although such conditions were beyond the reach of most ordinary cultivators, it was definitely extremely difficult to climb up the social ladder of the Princess of West Island with this. Even if it was not a fool's talk, it was definitely extremely difficult. Suddenly Lin Yi understood what Ning Shangling said to him just now. That could be regarded as an expectation, and it made Lin Yi take his current strength and status seriously. Lin Yi was shaking his head secretly, but Ning Shangling's next words made him and everyone present excited. If you want to be the husband of the Princess of West Island, you must have the most potential and strength. This is the biggest and only requirement. Chapter 4650. I think everyone here has heard that the most important trial in West Island is about to start. It's a rare opportunity, so I plan to let the winner of this trial become my daughter's future husband. Ning Shangling's unhurried words were like a clap of thunder in the air, stunning everyone present. Their eyes lit up and no one spoke for a long time. Trial in West Island? What the hell is that? Lin Yi was stunned and he couldn't help but feel a little confused. Everyone else here knew something about West Island, but he had never even heard of it. Although he had been with Ning Shuefei and the others a few days ago, everyone had been focusing on the automatic casting mechanism, and they had never mentioned it at all. Now in retrospect, Ning Shuefei might have deliberately not said these things. In front of Lin Yi and the others she always acted carefree, and her acting was really good, so Lin Yi and the others didn't notice the heaviness in her heart. Looking at everyone's extremely expectant expression, Lin Yi shrugged his shoulders in confusion. Could it be that this trial in West Island was so famous that even these outsiders who were not locals of West Island were so excited? In the past, when he was in the secular world, Lin Yi was no stranger to trials at all. He would participate in this trial from time to time, but since he arrived at Heaven Stage Island, he rarely participated in trials. Except for the newcomer's trial in the beginning, he hadn't participated in any more trials in the past year. He didn't expect that it would suddenly appear again, and in such an unexpected way. Brother Lin Yi, the trial in West Island, which is held once every 3 years, is very famous in the whole 5 islands of Heaven Stage. Han Jingjing, who was next to him, saw that Lin Yi was confused, so she immediately whispered in his ear and explained. Is there anything special about it? Lin Yi asked curiously. It wasn't strange for it to be a trial, but if it was a well-known trial on the 5 islands of Heaven Stage, then it would be a little interesting, not to mention that this time it was related to Ning Shuefei's marriage. I don't know what's so special about it. Han Jingjing stuck out her tongue in embarrassment. In the past 2 years in West Island, she had never left the island master's palace. To be precise, she rarely left the research room. She didn't know much about the outside world and she never participated in any trial. Moreover, she had never had the chance to experience this triennial trial before. It was her first time and she had only heard a few words about it from Ning Shuefei. I know that. Shanghai Laner, who was at the side, knew much more than Han Jingjing. She came over and explained, Grandpa once talked about this trial on the West Island. He called it one of the most valuable trials on the 5 heaven rank islands. It's very rare. Oh? Lin Yi was stunned for a moment. Shanghai Tianhua's knowledge and vision were definitely at the top of the Heaven Stage Island. Even he attached so much importance to the West Island trial, so it must be unique. There's nothing special about the rules of the trial itself. The rarest thing about the West Island trial is its trial site. Shanghai Laner tilted her head and recalled for a while. Then she continued to say to the two, it's said that there's an adventurous sea area near West Island, which is the remains of a battlefield left in ancient times. Because it's surrounded by sea fog and prohibitions, it's impossible to get in or even find it. It can only be opened once every 3 years by a specific opportunity. An ancient battlefield? Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. He felt an ancient and tragic aura coming to him, which made him tremble unconsciously. At the same time he couldn't help but be eager to have a try. It was said that in ancient times, geniuses and powerhouses came forth in large numbers. So, this battlefield remains where countless ancient heroes were buried must be very extraordinary. Well, I heard from my grandpa that it's a very dangerous place, but there are countless treasures of heaven and earth in it. If you're lucky, it's not impossible to get the inheritance of an ancient powerhouse. Basically, as long as the disciples can survive and complete the trial, they'll make great progress. That's why the West Island trial is so famous. In fact, we have a similar trial in the North Island, but the requirements are higher. Shanghai Laner said. I see. There's a chance to get the inheritance of an ancient powerhouse? It sounds like a great trial indeed. Lin Yi nodded thoughtfully. This ancient battlefield remains is a strategic existence for the whole West Island. In the past, every time it was opened, it was basically only open to the local core disciples of West Island. There were few opportunities for outsiders to participate. But according to Aunt Ning's words, I'm afraid it's a little different this time, Shanghai Laner said. Well, no wonder everyone is so excited. Lin Yi glanced around and saw everyone's excited expression. The ancient battlefield remains was such a key resource. Now, because of Ning Shuefei, Ning Shangling was going to open it to the public for the first time. She deserved to be the owner of an island. Other people set up an arena at most in the Kung Fu competition, but in Ning Shangling's hands she set up an ancient battlefield remains. This kind of courage and generosity was really extraordinary. However, if she wanted to choose the most potential and the most powerful younger generation as she said, she really needed such an excellent battlefield. Otherwise, if it was just a simple arena, she could only see the current strength at most, but could not see the future potential at all. Of course, the person chosen in that way was not worthy of the dignified princess of West Island. Lin Yi's eyes finally fell on Ning Xuefei. This girl, who had always been simple and optimistic, now had a strange pale face. Since he met Ning Xuefei in the far North Island, this was the first time that Lin Yi saw such an expression on her face. Helpless, hesitant, delicate, and pitiful, it made people feel sorry for her. For Ning Xuefei, the so-called trial of West Island was undoubtedly a kung fu competition to find a spouse. Most girls would not be happy about this kind of thing. Ning Xuefei wanted to resist, but she had no choice. She was the princess of West Island, born with supreme status and power, but at the same time she also had to pay the corresponding price. Marriage was just one of the most inconspicuous things, and this was no exception in West Island where women's rights prevailed. Lin Yi suddenly remembered that at the welcoming banquet a few days ago, facing the woman who suddenly broke in to frame him, Ning Xuefei had said those words in public without hesitation. At that time he just felt a little strange, but now he thought that it might be a hint, or it should be said that it was simply a clear indication. Why didn't Lin Yi choose me? Chapter 46-51. Lin Yi wasn't very sensitive when it came to relationships, but he'd come all this way from the common world, and he'd had so many women by his side. Even if he hadn't been enlightened, he'd have made some progress. Plus he wasn't an idiot. When Lin Yi was looking at Ning Xuefei in a daze, Ning Xuefei happened to look at him too. Their eyes met and time suddenly stopped. Lin Yi had never had any improper thoughts about Ning Xuefei, but at this moment, their hearts were unconsciously drawn closer. Suddenly Lin Yi had a feeling that his heart was pounding. Under Ning Xuefei's expectant gaze, Lin Yi took a deep breath. He was afraid that he had to find a way to interfere in the sudden trial of West Island. The trial of West Island will officially start in 2 days. If you are interested, you can sign up for it. I believe you won't be disappointed. After the announcement, Ning Shangling raised her glass to the crowd, drank it up, and took Ning Xuefei to leave first. The whole place was silent. Since the host had left, it meant that the birthday party was over. But obviously the crowd hadn't recovered from the surprise just now. They all stared at the back of the disappearing figure at the gate with burning eyes. It was already an unexpected gain to be able to participate in the trial of West Island this time. If they performed well in the trial, they would have a chance to become the husband of the princess of West Island. This was a chance to reach the sky in one step. After a long time, the people present finally left one after another and went back to their residences to prepare. Although not everyone would participate in this extremely rare trial of West Island, anyone with strength and ambition would never let go of this opportunity. Child Su, this is not right. Master Su, this isn't right. That pervert Lin Yi will definitely participate in this test. What if he's chosen as Ning Xuefei's husband? Wouldn't we be a complete failure? After returning to the room, Kong Ming couldn't help but worry. If they failed the task, they would be severely punished, and he didn't want to be the scapegoat. Do I need you to tell me? How can I not know about this? Do you have any good ideas? Su Lingchong paced back and forth in the room in frustration. Ning Shangling's sudden announcement was a good opportunity for others, but it was a big trouble for the two of them. Wasn't it a natural opportunity for Lin Yi to get close to Ning Xuefei? No. Kong Ming shook his head helplessly. A few days ago he tried to ruin the relationship between Ning Xuefei and Lin Yi by taking advantage of the welcoming banquet, but he was exposed on the spot. Until now he hadn't figured out how to further sow discord. He didn't expect that Lin Yi would have a chance to further his relationship with Ning Xuefei. What should they do? If not, then what the hell are you talking about? Su Lingchong waved his hand in annoyance. His face was filled with unease and anger. As the two of them were talking, a faint red shadow suddenly flashed in from the window. Su Lingchong and Kong Ming were startled at the same time. Bloodbat messenger. Su Lingchong hurriedly removed the note from the back of the bloodbat. As expected, it was indeed the latest instructions from the mysterious person. However, after reading it, Su Lingchong's face was filled with astonishment and a strange expression. Child Su. What did the higher-ups say? Kong Ming asked cautiously. The higher-ups already know that Ning Shangling is going to choose a husband for her daughter through the West Island trial test. They asked us to try our best to prevent Lin Yi from succeeding, even if we have to ruin the trial by hook or by crook. But, Su Lingchong suddenly paused. But what? Kong Ming hurriedly asked. The higher-ups mean that in this West Island trial test, we'd better stand out and take the opportunity to get close to the Princess of West Island? When saying this, Su Lingchong couldn't help but look a little strange. Well, Child Su, why don't you try it yourself? Kang Ming took the opportunity to suggest. Fuck off. Don't you know what I'm like? Su Lingchong suddenly became angry out of shame. His eyes were about to spit fire to kill people. If it were in the past, he would absolutely be happy to do this. But in this situation, there was no way to try it. Kang Ming suddenly shrank his head. The matter of Su Lingchong being killed wasn't a secret to them. In fact, those who were familiar with Su Lingchong knew that not only was this fellow physiologically incomplete, even his mind had long since been warped. Otherwise, how could he be a couple with Meng Tong? Well, why don't I do it? Kang Ming hesitated for a moment and said. He had wanted to say this from the beginning. He had always been looking forward to using Ning Xuefei, the Princess of West Island, to rise to the top in a single bound. He had done this in the secular world before. This guy was a petty scoundrel who liked to get close to women. The Princess of West Island had such a noble identity. Once he became her husband, he would be a big shot standing at the top of West Island in the future. If he was clever, it was not impossible for him to replace the princess and become the real owner of West Island. At that time, he would not need to be a minion of the center, and he would not need to obey Su Lingchong. What was more, Ning Xuefei was not just a princess of West Island. She herself was a super beauty. Such a stunner would make any man drool except for Su Lingchong, who was a pervert with a physical defect and a twisted mind. However, even if Kang Ming coveted Ning Xuefei, he did not dare to have any extravagant thoughts. After all, with his strength and status, the gap between him and the Princess of West Island was too big. Even a toad wanting to eat a swan's meat was not the way to do it. If it was set out, he would be laughed to death. But now it was different. Kang Ming did not have much power, but if he had the support of the huge and mysterious organization, the center, behind him, it would be possible, right? The longer he joined the center, the more he knew about the power of this mysterious organization, and the more shocked he was. If he could get the full support of the top this time, Kang Ming believed that he definitely had a chance to succeed, and the chance was not small. You? Hearing this, Su Lingchong looked him up and down, and there was obviously some distrust on his face. He almost wrote the words overconfident on his face. I just have such a suggestion. Kang Ming could not help but feel anxious. If the other party knew that he only wanted to take the opportunity to get promoted, he would suffer a lot. Well, there is no other candidate except you. Su Lingchong thought for a while and nodded. Although he felt that this guy was not worthy of Ning Xuefei, the problem was that he could not do it himself. Who else could it be except Kang Ming? Thank you, Child Su. Kang Ming was overjoyed. This time he did not come to West Island in vain, and there was a chance to turn things around. Chapter 4652. With his and Kang Ming's strength, it was hard enough to deal with Lin Yi alone, not to mention that they would have to deal with other powerful competitors. This matter must be planned in the long run and prepared in advance. While Su Lingchong and Kang Ming were plotting, the other people were also gearing up for the next trial test in West Island. Only Lin Yi, as usual, was meditating and practicing after returning to his room. However, Lin Yi only meditated for less than an hour this time. He couldn't help thinking of Ning Xuefei's resentful and hopeful expression. At this time he was really not in the mood to practice. Although he had secretly made up his mind to participate in the trial test in West Island before at the banquet, Lin Yi was still a little hesitant at the moment. After all, this thing happened too suddenly, and the relationship between him and Ning Xuefei was not natural, far from the point of marriage. If he really succeeded this time, what about his other female friends? Would it be fair to them? What would they think after knowing it? However, it was impossible for Lin Yi to be cruel and ignore Ning Xuefei. When he thought of this girl's expression at the banquet, he couldn't help feeling a little heartache. When he was hesitating, the door was suddenly pushed open. Lin Yi heard the sound and looked up. It was Laner and Han Jingjing from Shanghai Laner. Why did they come out in the middle of the night instead of resting in the island owner's palace? Why are you two here? Don't you sleep so late? Lin Yi looked at the two women strangely and then added, Where is Fei Fei? Why doesn't she come? The one who tied the bell should untie it. Lin Yi felt that if he wanted to solve the current dilemma, he had to make it clear to Ning Xuefei face to face. At least he had to thoroughly understand her mind first. What if those so-called hints before were just his wishful thinking and misunderstanding? This matter was related to Ning Xuefei's marriage, so there was no room for carelessness. Lin Yi felt that even if he wanted to help Ning Xuefei solve this predicament, the leader must be Ning Xuefei herself. Only when she personally said her wish, Lin Yi would be able to realize it for her without any distractions. Otherwise, everything would be based on guessing and he would always be uncertain. She can't come. Shengguan Laner shrugged her shoulders helplessly. One was marked by the company one kept. She had learned some of Lin Yi's habitual little tricks to perfection. Can't come? Lin Yi was taken aback for a moment and then asked nervously, why? Did something happen? Don't be nervous, big brother Lin Yi. Feifei, she's okay. She can't come out with us because of the rules of West Island. Any aristocratic woman over the age of 18 must wait in the boudoir to choose a husband, and she can't come out and run around. Feifei is the princess of West Island, and so many eyes are watching her, Han Jingjing explained. I see. That is to say, before choosing a husband she will lose her personal freedom? Lin Yi couldn't help feeling a little sad for Ning Xuefei. Being the princess of West Island was her luck, but at the same time, it was her great misfortune. Although it had only been a few days since he came to West Island, Lin Yi found a very interesting phenomenon. Although feminism was prevalent in West Island, the higher the level, the less obvious feminism was. All kinds of behaviors were more like a patriarchal society, and even to some extent it was even worse. Take marriage as an example. In a normal feminist society, the woman should have the absolute initiative. It was more like for a man to stay in the boudoir. But in fact it was true for the ordinary class of West Island. But when it came to the level of aristocracy, women were the opposite. Lin Yi speculated that the main reason why West Island did this deliberately was that they wanted to connect with the outside world. After all, aristocratic women were likely to marry the big forces of the outer island. If even they absolutely followed feminism, it would not bring benefits to West Island, and it might bring a great disaster. Yes, but it's not a big deal for Feifei if she can't go out of the island master's palace. She is originally a little homebody like Jingjing, and now she is staying in the research room. Shengguan Laner said. The vocabulary of the secular world was at her fingertips, and she spoke it more fluently than Lin Yi. That's true, but I'm afraid she doesn't feel good in her heart. After all, her marriage can only be decided by God. Lin Yi sighed and couldn't help but become a little silent. Brother Lin Yi, if you can't be chosen this time, Feifei will be sad for the rest of her life. You must not fail. Han Jingjing looked at Lin Yi with burning eyes and said, Yes, Feifei is not willing to marry those who are blinded by greed. Little junior brother, you can only win this time. We all believe in you. Shengguan Laner encouraged him. Well, this is just our wishful thinking. Feifei may not think so. Lin Yi had to smile bitterly. He didn't know what Ning Xuefei was thinking, and that was the most troublesome thing. Who said that? Han Jingjing suddenly took out a letter and handed it to Lin Yi. She said, Brother Lin Yi, Feifei asked me to give this to you. Lin Yi was slightly stunned when he saw this. He took the letter and opened it. He found that there was no content on it. There was only a line of delicate handwriting. To be precise, there were only 6 words. See or never see again. At first glance, it was simply a prose poem of the stream of consciousness. It made people confused and didn't know what she was trying to express. However, this was not a problem for Lin Yi. He used to be a scholar in the secular world. He was instilled with all kinds of knowledge by old Lin since he was young. There was a period of time when he used a broken netbook to learn poetry and ancient prose. It was in the name of improving the self-cultivation of an assassin. After pondering for a while, Lin Yi already understood what Ning Xuefei wanted to express. It seemed to be implicit, but it was actually very straightforward. Either they could always see each other or they would never see each other again. In the future, they would be on different sides of the world and would never have any interaction with each other. How could they always see each other? The answer was naturally self-evident. If they couldn't do this, once Ning Xuefei married someone else's wife, then the birthday party just now would be their final farewell. Holding the thin letter in his hand and looking at the delicate handwriting on it, Lin Yi was stunned. Before this, he had never thought that Ning Xuefei would be such a strong woman. Either they would stay together forever or they would be on different sides of the world. There was no room for compromise between the two. Chapter 46-53. Alright, quiet down. Our mission is complete. Let little junior brother have some peace and quiet. Shanghai Laner looked at Lin Yi's calm expression and smiled slightly. She believed that Lin Yi would not let her down, nor would he let Ning Xuefei down. Absolutely not. Lan you want me to stay with him? Han Jingjing looked at Shanghai Laner blankly, and then looked at Lin Yi. Suddenly, there was a trace of shyness on her face. Puff. Shanghai Laner was stunned for a moment, and then she burst into laughter when she realized it. Even Lin Yi was amused. Han Jingjing's IQ was unquestionable. She was definitely a real monster, but it was limited to various kinds of research. At other times she would be silly from time to time, just like now. After being laughed at by Lin Yi and Shangguan for a long time, Han Jingjing finally reacted. Her face flushed red and even her neck turned red. She lowered her head as much as she could. If there was a crack in the ground, this girl might really be able to squeeze her head into it. In the end, Han Jingjing was dragged away by Shanghai Laner, who laughed so hard that she was out of breath. Lin Yi was left alone in the room again. Holding Ning Xuefei's letter in his hand, he secretly made up his mind and no longer hesitated. Ning Xuefei was a princess of an island, and she could write such a letter. If Lin Yi still didn't understand her intention, he should be struck by lightning. This time he couldn't let her down no matter what. After eliminating the hesitation in his heart, Lin Yi suddenly became refreshed again. He knew that this time, the trial of the West Island gathered masters from all walks of life, and the process would certainly not be so smooth. It was inevitable that there would be danger everywhere. However, since his debut in the secular world, Lin Yi had never been afraid of anything. He had even broken through the dragon's pool and tiger's den in the South Island unscathed. Would he be afraid of this trifling trial of the West Island? Casting aside all distracting thoughts, Lin Yi was about to adjust his state and start cultivating. At this time, a familiar aura suddenly appeared outside the door. Lin Yi was immediately delighted. Qi Wenhan had arrived. "Brother Qi, I've been waiting for you for a long time." Lin Yi hurriedly stepped forward to open the door and warmly welcomed her in. This was the promise he made with Qi Wenhan with his eyes at the banquet before. It was rare for his old friend to meet in this place in West Island. Naturally, they should have a good gathering. "I'm sorry, I haven't completely settled down on my side, so I was delayed." "I've made you wait for a long time, Brother Ling." Qi Wenhan smiled apologetically, and after sizing up Lin Yi for a while, he suddenly stepped forward and gave Lin Yi a bear hug. "Brother Ling, you really are a good person." "Those bastards of the Dragon Boat Escort Agency even dared to say that you died in the South Island." I knew they were bullshitting." Qi Wenhan had known Lin Yi's real name for a long time, but he was used to calling him Brother Ling, so he didn't bother to change it back. Ling 1 and Lin Yi were similar anyway. It's a long story, but I won't die so easily." Lin Yi smiled and led Qi Wenhan into the room, pouring a cup of spiritual tea for him personally. Then he asked, "By the way, Brother Qi, why are you here? Is it possible that the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency has a good relationship with West Island?" "How is it possible? West Island is a giant that dominates Heaven Stage Island, and we are just a small escort agency. If it weren't for you, they wouldn't even have heard of us, so how could we have any relationship?" Qi Wenhan laughed at himself, and glanced at the letter on the table out of the corner of his eye. He couldn't help but feel a little strange, but he didn't pay much attention to it. Hearing this, Lin Yi smiled. Qi Wenhan wasn't belittling himself. Before him, the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency was only a little famous in the Wayark Sea, and it might not even be well known in other seas of the Southland. Not to mention West Island, which was thousands of miles away and had nothing to do with each other. "This time, I'm here in the name of the Southland Escort Agency Alliance. Taking advantage of this rare opportunity, my father asked me to come out and see the world. If there's a chance, I'll make some useful connections. This is the benefit of being the overlord of the Southland Escort Agency, because I can represent the whole sea of the Southland. Otherwise, if it's only under the name of our Equal of Heaven Escort Agency, people won't even look at us, and maybe we can't even enter the door," Qi Wenhan said with a bitter smile. "One step at a time. The Equal of Heaven Escort Agency being able to walk out of the sea of the Southland is already a gratifying progress. At least it shows that it's a whole level higher than before." Lin Yi smiled and analyzed. "What's more, the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency is now the overlord of the Southland Escort Agency. Any big force that wants a share of the sea of the Southland can't avoid you in the end. As long as there are benefits, there will be connections. This is the perfect strategic period for the escort agency to go further." "Don't say it's us, okay? Don't forget, Brother Ling, you also have shares," Qi Wenhan said seriously. Okay, it's us." Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh and continued to ask, "So, Brother Qi, you came all the way to West Island this time to attend the birthday party and expand your connections?" "Not really, these are just incidental things. I actually came here with a heavy responsibility," Qi Wenhan said, shaking his head. "Heavy responsibility?" Lin Yi was stunned. "Yes, you saw what happened at the birthday party, right? My father specially sent me here this time for this Princess of West Island. She will definitely choose a husband for her coming-of-age ceremony at the age of 18, and he asked me to find a way to fight for it. Although the chances are not big if I succeed, we will have a giant like West Island as our backer, and then our Equal of Heaven escort agency will be invincible, Chi Wonhan said. Hearing this, Lin Yi's expression suddenly became a little strange. He had guessed that there must be a lot of competitors this time, but he never thought that even Chi Wonhan would be one. This really made him speechless. What's wrong? Chi Wonhan noticed Lin Yi's expression, and suddenly said in a daze, Brother Ling, are you the same? Oh, by the way, Brother Ling, you are the special envoy of North Island. I heard that North Island and West Island have always been on good terms, so it's normal for you to have this kind of mission. Lin Yi didn't know what to say for a moment, and his eyes unnaturally swept over the letter on the table. He couldn't say that he and Ning Xuefei had been together for a long time, could he? Following Lin Yi's eyes, Chi Wenhan's eyes also fell on the letter. From the beginning, he had noticed that the letter was not completely folded, and it was easy to see the delicate girl's handwriting on it. In an instant, Chi Wenhan suddenly understood something in his heart. He looked at the letter in surprise and turned to look at Lin Yi in disbelief, saying, Brother Ling, are you and Ning Xuefei? Lin Yi smiled bitterly and said nothing. Chapter 46-54. He patted Lin Yi's shoulder and said, What's more, I'm not optimistic about this at all. I know my identity and strength best. Although the requirement to participate in the trial of West Island is that the strength requirement cannot exceed the Yuanying realm, but this time I, who am at the peak of Gold Core realm, am at the bottom. This was true. If only the local disciples of West Island participated in the trial in the past, Chi Wenhan, who was at the peak of Gold Core realm, was definitely not weak. But this time it was different. The people who participated in the trial were the elites of each island. Those who had the ambition and courage to target Ning Xuefei, the princess of West Island, were not easy to deal with. Most of their strength should be at the Yuanying realm, not lower than this. Otherwise it was unknown whether they could survive to the end of the trial, let alone reach the sky in a single bound. And there is another more important reason why I don't want to participate in the competition. A strange light suddenly bloomed in Chi Wenhan's eyes. This man, who had always been cheerful and calm, blushed for the first time at this moment, which was really surprising. Brother Chi. Lin Yi's heart moved. He was no stranger to this kind of burning eyes because most people had this stage. Yes, I have someone I like. Chi Wenhan scratched his head in embarrassment and confessed to Lin Yi. When did it happen? When Lin Yi heard this, he suddenly became interested. When he left South Continent, there was no news at all. With Chi Wenhan's free and easy style, he should not hide this kind of thing so deeply. Not long ago, I fell in love with her at first sight. But Chi Wenhan suddenly looked gloomy and said with some disappointment, She is a master of the Yuanying realm, but I am only at the peak of Gold Core realm, alas. Seeing Chi Wenhan's sigh, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel happy and said with a smile, So what if your strength is not as high as the other parties? The key is whether she has feelings for you or not. You are so worried about gains and losses. This isn't like Brother Chi's style. Chi Wenhan couldn't help but blush at Lin Yi's words. He awkwardly said, I also know that I can't be so worried about personal gains and losses. As a man, when it's time to fight for something, I absolutely can't shrink back and admit defeat. I understand these principles, but I just can't control my own brain. He couldn't help but think in this direction. After all, she's not an ordinary cultivator, but the daughter of the owner of the treasure ship transportation company in the South Continent. The daughter of the ship king? Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. When he was in the South Continent, he had heard someone mention this treasure ship transportation company by chance. If it was just an ordinary transportation company, Chi Wenhan, as the young master of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, would definitely not feel inferior. However, the other party was a treasure ship transportation company, and the meaning behind it was completely different. In this Heaven Stage Island, a strategic existence like a treasure ship had always been owned by those top forces. This principle was also true in reverse. A force that could own a treasure ship was definitely a tyrant that could not be underestimated in the 5 great Heaven Stage Islands. It should be known that even the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, which had become the overlord of the escort agencies in the South Continent, was far from qualified and had a treasure ship. Chi Wenhan, as the young master of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, was faced with a treasure ship transportation company with such a deep background. It was no wonder that he would be so worried about personal gains and losses and sigh in despair. His strength was not as high as the other parties, and his background was not as good as the other parties. If he rashly approached them, it would be very normal for others to say that he was overestimating his own capabilities. At that time they might not even be friends anymore. The king of ships? You can say that. Qi Wenhan was stunned for a moment. Wasn't a treasure ship the king of ships? The treasure ship transportation company itself was the uncrowned king. So that's how it is. You don't need to sigh, I have a way. Lin Yi's heart moved slightly. He took out a small wooden box from his pocket and handed it to Qi Wenhan. You don't need to worry with this. What is it? Qi Wenhan curiously took the small wooden box. He discovered that although the box was ordinary, the cool aura coming from it made him feel refreshed. He hurriedly opened it and was immediately shocked. He was a person who knew what was good and what was bad. It was actually a condensed nascent golden pill. With your strength and foundation, it's actually time for you to break through. As long as you take this condensed nascent golden pill, it should be able to protect your nascent soul. Lin Yi smiled slightly. With Qi Wenhan's ability, as long as his strength could be on equal footing with the other party, he would definitely not feel inferior anymore. After all, if one were to really talk about it, although the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency could not compare to the Treasure Ship Transportation Company, it was definitely not too far off. No matter what, it was still the overlord of the escort agencies in the South Continent. This is too precious. Brother Ling, you should keep it for yourself. I'm not in a hurry. The condensed nascent golden pill was like a hot potato in Qi Wenhan's hands. He immediately became flustered and desperately stuffed it back to Lin Yi. You're not in a hurry? You're not in a hurry, but the lady is. Lin Yi glanced at him and angrily threw the small wooden box back to Qi Wenhan. He curled his lips and said, she's the daughter of a ship king. Who knows when she'll get married? At that time you won't even have time to cry and you're still not in a hurry? Don't blame me for not reminding you as a brother. Once you come across this kind of thing you must grasp it tightly. Otherwise you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Qi Wenhan instantly fell into a dilemma after hearing Lin Yi's words. He naturally understood this principle. Moreover, according to his knowledge, there were many young masters who had designs on this sweetheart. If he acted too late he might really regret it for the rest of his life. However, Qi Wenhan was very clear about the value of a condensed nascent golden pill. Especially since this was a high-quality condensed nascent golden pill, no matter how many spirit jades one had, one might not be able to buy it. Even if his relationship with Lin Yi was not too bad, he still did not dare to rashly accept such a valuable item. What are you still hesitating for? I've never seen you so wishy-washy before. With our friendship, could it be that you can't even accept a mere condensed nascent golden pill? Lin Yi pretended to be angry. Alright, since Brother Ling has put it this way then I'll accept it. However, I'll say this first. You must accept the amount of spirit jades you paid for this condensed nascent golden pill. Otherwise, I won't be able to live with myself. Qi Wenhan nodded. Who told you that this condensed nascent golden pill was bought? Lin Yi looked at him strangely and smiled. Didn't I tell you before that I'm a real elixir refiner? I made these pills myself. Lin Yi looked at him strangely and smiled. Chapter 4655. To be honest, if it wasn't for the sudden appearance of the West Mountain Elder, I was planning on making a batch of pills specifically for the escort agency. Unfortunately, things happened so suddenly that I had no other choice. This time I can help you make up for it, so don't dawdle. This gathering infant golden pill was originally prepared for you, so quickly accept it, Lin Yi said with a smile. Qi Wenhan did not have much else to say, so he nodded and said, if that's the case, then I won't stand on ceremony with you, Brother Ling. You should have done this a long time ago. Lin Yi smiled. In his eyes, Qi Wenhan's senior brother Ku Bai, and the others were all on his side. He was never stingy with his own people, and if the gathering infant golden pill could help him achieve good things, that would be for the best. Speaking of which, I am ashamed. Ever since we met, Brother Ling has always been the one who has helped me. Even if I sell my life to you, it won't be enough. It looks like I can only work like a horse for you, Qi Wenhan said half-jokingly. Why are you working like a horse for me instead of being the young master of an escort agency? Brother Qi, don't forget that I own 30% of the agency's shares. Helping you is helping myself. This is called a long-term investment, not a favor. Lin Yi laughed disapprovingly. If all the businessmen in the world were to invest like you, Brother Ling, they would probably be starving, unable to recoup their investment for the rest of their lives. Qi Wenhan smiled and shook his head, then looked at the gathering infant golden pill in his hand and said excitedly, To be honest, Brother Ling, this gathering infant golden pill of yours is really timely. My father and I have been asking around for the gathering infant golden pill for half a year. Unfortunately, there is no stock in the South Continent. You have solved my urgent problem. Alright, hurry up and condense your nascent soul, then get the daughter of the ship king. I am waiting to attend your wedding, Lin Yi said with a smile. Don't worry, Brother Ling, what you said just now has enlightened me. Since I have met her, I must hold on to her tightly. I will not let myself regret it for the rest of my life. Qi Wenhan's eyes suddenly became passionate again. Compared to before, he was obviously more determined. This is the brother Qi I know. Lin Yi nodded his head in appreciation. He chuckled and said, don't forget to send me an invitation when the time comes. No matter how far it is, I will still rush over. I really want to see how beautiful the daughter of a shipping king is to be able to charm you. This. Qi Wenhan lowered his head and rubbed his hands together, saying somewhat embarrassedly, actually, she has also come this time. You'll be able to see him in 2 days. What? I don't see anything. Was he sitting with you just now? Lin Yi blinked. Previously, he had only been paying attention to Qi Wenhan and hadn't paid attention to the people around him. Well, the main reason I came here this time is to have more opportunities to get in touch with her. She has mixed in with the Southern Continent's diplomatic corps, but this is a secret visit. Very few people know her identity. Qi Wenhan smiled bitterly. Oh, then I really have to find a chance to get to know her. Lin Yi laughed and looked at Qi Wenhan's embarrassed look. He said playfully, so Brother Qi, you're quite close to her. You've even gotten together. Not bad, not bad. Brother Ling, you've misunderstood. I haven't even gotten close to her yet. The main reason we're together this time is because the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency is cooperating with her family's treasure ship transportation company. Qi Wenhan suddenly blushed again. What kind of cooperation? Lin Yi asked in surprise. This time for the birthday party, the Southern Continent Escort Agency Alliance has a large batch of goods to be delivered to the West Island. This used to be the business of the Four Seas Escort Agency, but now it has fallen into the hands of the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency. Not only the West Island, but also the long-distance escort business related to other Heaven Stage islands. From now on, the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency will be responsible for it, Qi Wenhan explained. This is not bad. We can take over these businesses. The escort agency will definitely be reborn. Lin Yi's eyes lit up as he said this. The escort agencies that were limited to the waters of the Southern Continent and the escort agencies that were spread across the 5 Heaven Stage islands were on 2 completely different levels. Once the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency could successfully take over these long-distance voyages, its strength would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. The other escort agencies that were limited to the waters of the Southern Continent would definitely not be able to compete with them. Yes, my father and I both feel that these businesses are of the utmost importance, and we definitely can't make any mistakes. However, we don't have a treasure ship of our own, and it's impossible for us to travel so far by relying on a normal ship. That's why we decided to cooperate with the treasure ship transportation company. It's also because of this that I met her. A silly smile suddenly appeared on Qi Wenhan's face. Lin Yi couldn't help but chuckle. The Qi Wenhan of the past wasn't exactly a playboy, but he'd definitely been an elegant young master. Now he turned into a silly, infatuated man because of a woman. The word love was truly mysterious. That's enough. Brother Qi, you can stop being so infatuated. I'm getting goosebumps. Lin Yi shook his head speechlessly. Same here. Brother Ling, aren't you also entangled in love? We're truly brothers, Qi Wenhan said with a laugh. I'm not as infatuated as you are. Lin Yi pursed his lips and asked, by the way, what's the situation in the Southern Continent recently? Has the Spirit Beast clan made any moves? They've already begun to take action. The waters and city docks closest to the southern island have already been taken over by the experts of the Spirit Beast clan. Although they've only said that they're maintaining order and haven't directly started collecting fees, everyone knows that it's only a matter of time. Speaking of this, Qi Wenhan's expression suddenly became serious. As expected, they can't hold back anymore. Lin Yi nodded. To be honest, the fact that the Spirit Beast clan had taken so long to take action was already very unexpected. With the Vermilion Bird's wild ambition, it was inevitable that they would encroach on the waters of the Southern Continent. No one could stop them unless they started a war with the Spirit Beast clan. This is all thanks to Brother Ling's reminder. Otherwise, our Heaven's Equal Escort Agency would have suffered a great loss. Do you know that the Divine Wind Escort Agency has already fallen apart? Just because one of their fleets refused to be disciplined, they were killed on the spot by the experts of the Spirit Beast clan. After that, every time the Divine Wind Escort Agency escorted a convoy, their ships would be destroyed and their people would die. Now we can't hold on any longer. This is the consequence of provoking the Spirit Beast clan. If we hadn't made preparations in advance, I'm afraid that the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency would have been the ones targeted, Chi Wonhan said with lingering fear. Chapter 46-56. Holy Wind Escort Agency's foundation was much deeper than that of Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. He didn't expect to be the first unlucky one. He couldn't help but ask, since the Spirit Beast clan has taken action, what's the reaction of the surrounding forces? They're angry but they don't dare to say anything. At least as far as the sea area of South State is concerned, all of them are not enough to satisfy the Spirit Beast clan. Of course they don't even dare to fart. Chi Wonhan smiled bitterly and said after a pause, "It's okay now, but I'm afraid that the Spirit Beast clan will become more aggressive in the future. So, I actually have another mission this time, which is to communicate with the higher-ups of West Island and see what West Island's attitude is about this. After that, other forces will try their best to get in touch with them. If human forces can unite to contain the Spirit Beast clan together, it will be great." The image of Azure Dragon flashed through Lin Yi's mind, especially the attitude he showed during the birthday banquet and the words he said to him. He'd been confused before but now he understood a little. Azure Dragon's intentions were probably the same as Chi Wonhan's. They were both here for the same thing, it was just that they were on different sides. The Spirit Beast clan was originally isolated from the world. Now it took the first step under the command of Vermilion Bird, but Vermilion Bird wasn't stupid enough to think that he could be the enemy of the whole world. Every time the Spirit Beast clan took a step forward, they had to carefully observe the reaction of human forces. If they were besieged by human forces before they had enough strength, even the Spirit Beast clan couldn't afford it. In this case, the new Azure Dragon promoted by Vermilion Bird became the best choice to deal with human forces. This time he came to West Island to attend the birthday party. He didn't just want to be friendly, but also had the same idea as Chi Wonhan. He wanted to take the opportunity to find out the views of the higher-ups of West Island on the situation of South State. Not only West Island but also the other Heaven Stage Islands including North Island, were also the people Azure Dragon had to deal with. Thinking of this, Lin Yi couldn't help but smile. No wonder Azure Dragon talked to him specially. However, Lin Yi still ignored one thing. Azure Dragon did shoulder the mission of dealing with human forces, and he did plan to find a chance to visit the North Island. But this couldn't be a reason for Azure Dragon to talk to him, at least this reason was far from sufficient. No matter what, Lin Yi was just a special envoy from the North Island. In terms of level, he was far from being comparable to the Azure Dragon, a top-notch elder of the Spirit Beast clan. If the Azure Dragon really wanted to visit the North Island, why would he look for him? Wouldn't it be better to find Lan Tiefu? North Island, West Island, and Nanzhou. Even Zhongdao was included. Even Lin Yi himself didn't realize that he had a lot of intersection with these places. Although he was a small figure, if he really played a role, he would be a key fulcrum that could leverage the entire South Continent. The Azure Dragon saw this, which was why the scene at the birthday banquet happened. Otherwise, a mere Lin Yi would not even be qualified to enter his eyes, let alone take the initiative to talk to him. The Spirit Beast clan is such a behemoth that the forces in the South Continent Sea can't contend with. To be honest, the final outcome of the South Continent Sea has nothing to do with the local forces. It depends on whether the Spirit Beast clan and the human forces in the other Heaven Stage Islands will eventually reach some kind of tacit understanding or compromise. The key depends on the attitude of these big shots, Lin Yi said thoughtfully. Yes, I think so too. That's why I have to find a way to contact the higher-ups of these islands. I don't expect any kind of help from them. At least I have to find out their attitude first so that I can always be prepared in advance. Chi Wonhan nodded. Yes, that's all I can do for the time being. If there are any changes in the future, remember to inform me at any time. I don't dare to say anything else, but I have some connections in the Heaven Stage Islands. Maybe they can help, Lin Yi said after thinking for a while. Okay, I'll keep it in mind, Chi Wonhan said with great joy. After these words, the two talked for a while. They didn't talk too late. At this time, Chi Wonhan took the gathering nascent soul golden elixir and couldn't wait to go back and prepare for the breakthrough. As for Lin Yi, he also needed to adjust his state, consolidate his strength and prepare for the upcoming West Island trial test. Ning Xuefei's short letter had completely dispelled the doubts in Lin Yi's heart. This time, the West Island trial test was related to Ning Shuefei's lifelong happiness, so there was absolutely no room for failure. Although time was tight and there were only 2 days left, Lin Yi still decided to have a good closed-door training. He didn't expect to have any amazing breakthrough, but at least he wanted to control his strength more skillfully. Lin Yi had a vague hunch that this time, the West Island trial test would not be so easy, and he was afraid that there would be a fierce battle. While Lin Yi was in closed-door training on the other side, Su Lingchong and Kang Mingming, who also lived in the emissary's mansion, unexpectedly had an uninvited guest. A middle-aged man with a white face and no beard knocked on their door. At first glance, this man looked sloppy and ordinary, and he was the kind of person who would never be found in a crowd of people. If one had to say what characteristics he had, it could only be said that this man's eyes were small and focused, which made people know at first glance that he was a shrewd businessman. "I'm Dong Fenghua, the shopkeeper of the West Island branch of the Central Chamber of Commerce. Nice to meet you, Special Envoy Su." As soon as this man saw Su Lingchong, he gave him a big salute, which was the standard etiquette for superiors and subordinates, and his posture was extremely low. "Okay, come in." Su Lingchong and Kang Mingming looked at each other, and then they invited him into the room. Most people in the Central Chamber of Commerce didn't know the existence of the Central Chamber of Commerce, but at the level of the shopkeeper of the branch, he must be an internal member of the Central, just like Si Haishao in the North Island. "What can I do for you?" Su Lingchong continued to look at Dong Fenghua, who came uninvited. He didn't receive any order or news in advance, so he was a little confused about the visit of the shopkeeper of the West Island branch. Did he simply come to pay his respects after hearing the news? This was not impossible. Although the position of the shopkeeper of the branch seemed to be glorious, his status in the Central was far less than that of Su Lingchong, the special emissary of the North Island. It was normal for him to find an opportunity to show his goodwill. "Special Emissary Su, I received a secret order from the top yesterday, asking me to cooperate with you and be your logistical support," Dong Fenghua said respectfully. "Logistical support?" Su Lingchong and Kang Mingming's eyes lit up at the same time, and then they asked, "What can you support?" "Elixirs or magic weapons." "Ah, you two must be joking. Although our Central Chamber of Commerce is also involved in these things, they are not our main products, and they may not be effective in a short time." Dong Fenghua paused and said with a mysterious smile, "What I brought this time are specially supplied high-tech materials, which should be of some use." Chapter 4657. "Oh, take it out and have a look." Su Lingchong and Kang Mingming couldn't help but be interested. Dong Fenghua smiled slightly and clapped her hands gently. 2 servants came in from outside the door. They were carrying a big box that was half the height of a person, and they seemed to be struggling. Kang Mingming couldn't wait to step forward and open the box. After seeing what was inside, he suddenly gasped, "Fuck? Isn't this a laser cannon? Oh my god, Long Di Dong and an intelligent armor?" These 2 things were extremely rare even in the secular world. Ordinary people simply couldn't get their hands on them, let alone on this heavenly island. The center was really awesome. They could even get their hands on these 2 things. These 2 things should be able to help you. I wish Brother Kong success in advance. Dong Fenghua smiled and complimented. "Ha, that's for sure. With this equipment, I don't need to be afraid." Kang Mingming couldn't help but be overjoyed. If he wasn't strong enough, he could make up for it with equipment. With the laser cannon and the intelligent armor, even if he faced Lin Yi head-on, he wouldn't be afraid. Seeing that Kang Mingming was so excited, Su Lingchong was puzzled. He looked up and down at the laser cannon and the intelligent armor and said strangely, "What? Is this thing really that good?" As a member of the center, of course, he had seen many technological products in the secular world. However, the impression that those things gave him was nothing more than novelty. It was quite convenient to use, but it was absolutely nonsense to say that it was very powerful, especially these so-called high-tech weapons. In a word, they were flashy but impractical. It sounded awesome, but that was limited to ordinary people. It would be difficult to use it to deal with masters in the foundation establishment stage, let alone the nascent soul stage, which was far above the foundation establishment stage. What could these 2 things do in the West Island trial test? Young Master Su, don't underestimate these high-tech weapons in the secular world, especially this laser cannon and intelligent armor. Their power and effect are absolutely unimaginable unless you see them with your own eyes. Kang Mingming's eyes lit up as he looked at the 2 pieces of equipment. They were just delivered at this critical moment. They were simply tailor-made for him. It can't be an exaggeration, right? Su Lingchong was still skeptical. Hee hee, young Master Su, you don't know. Don't look at how many people in the secular world say that the Great Circle of the Heaven rank is an atomic bomb. At most, its destructive power and deterrence were more shocking. This laser cannon is a rare high-tech weapon in the secular world. Its power is far beyond that of ordinary technological weapons. I don't think even a profound ascending stage master would be able to penetrate it, let alone a mere nascent soul stage Lin Yi. Kang Ming said confidently. Really? Su Lingchong's eyelids twitched. Even a profound ascending stage expert could be penetrated with one shot. Wouldn't that be a super-killing weapon? If that was the case, then the value of this thing would be huge. The higher-ups really put in a lot of effort for this West Island trial. It's absolutely true. Young Master Su, don't be fooled by the fact that the most powerful technological weapon in the secular world is the atomic bomb. That thing is only powerful enough to kill ordinary people. Ordinary cultivators might not be able to withstand it, but if it's used against experts of the original infant stage, it's probably useless. But this laser cannon is different. Kang Ming licked his lips and said excitedly, the laser cannon is not a large-scale destructive weapon like the atomic bomb. Instead, it concentrates all its power in one place. The terrible penetration and lethality of that point-to-point is unimaginable. Nascent soul stage can't bear it, and profound ascending stage probably can't bear it either. I even suspect that no cultivator in the world can bear it. That's impossible. The real top masters are not what you can imagine at all. No matter how powerful a technological weapon is, it's just a pile of scrap iron in front of them. Otherwise, they would be invincible in the secular world. Su Lingchong curled his lips. He had never been interested in the so-called technology of the secular world. To be precise, he looked down on the secular world at all. Moreover, his understanding of masters was far from that of a low-level dabbler like Kang Ming. No matter how strong a cultivator was, he couldn't block this little laser cannon? Bullshit. Yes, young Master Su is right. But the lethality of the laser cannon really can't be underestimated. I can guarantee that it's no problem to deal with Lin Yi. Kang Ming smiled apologetically. Well, what you said is indeed a bit interesting, but what is the land atomic bomb? What is that? Su Lingchong suddenly asked. It's one of the most powerful technological weapons in the secular world. I can't explain it in a few words. To put it simply, if West Island is given a heavyweight atomic bomb, then West Island will probably disappear from the map of Heaven Stage Island? Kang Ming thought about it and explained. So awesome. Su Lingchong was shocked. He said in disbelief, West Island has all kinds of super protective formations. Once they are all activated, even the giants in the mountain opening period can't do anything about it. Are you kidding me? I'm just making an example. If West Island doesn't have a protective array, and all the people there are ordinary people, even if they don't sink, they will be useless from then on. That's why this thing has such a terrible deterrent power in the secular world, Kang Ming explained. Is that so? That's not simple. I didn't expect the secular world to be so capable. They can even create such a thing. Su Lingchong nodded. Haha, Brother Kang seems to know a lot about these things. This is an eye-opener for me, Dong Fanghua, who was beside him, said with a smile. Oh, he came from the secular world. It would be strange if he didn't know this. Su Lingchong curled his lips. Oh. No wonder Brother Kang is so familiar with laser cannons and intelligent armor. Then Brother Kang, you must know more than me. I won't introduce more, lest I show off in front of an expert. To be honest, I don't really understand this thing. Luckily, I met Brother Kang, such an understanding person. Dong Fanghua let out a sigh of relief. No problem. Don't I have an instruction manual? Anyway, there's still some time before the trial starts. I just need to study it a little. Leave it to me, haha. Kang Ming smiled proudly, and then he couldn't wait to fiddle with it. This was his capital and reliance to deal with Lin Yi. This time, whether he could get Ning Xuefei or not, depended on whether this thing was powerful enough. 2 days passed in a flash. In these 2 days, although masters from various Heaven Stage Islands gathered in West Island, there weren't as many strange faces on the streets as expected. Because most people were adjusting their state, making the final preparations for the trial of West Island that was about to start, R 1052. Chapter 4658. Early in the morning, people from all walks of life gathered in the square of the island master's temporary imperial residence. Although there was no special division, everyone still consciously divided themselves into several areas, just like during the birthday banquet. The cultivators from each area gathered in one area. When Lin Yi arrived at the square accompanied by Han Jingjing and Shanghai Laner, the registration for this West Island trial had officially begun. The format was very simple. Everyone only needed to sign their names on the trial list. As long as they did not exceed the strength requirement of the Yuanying stage, there was almost no threshold. This could be said to be the most relaxed conditions in the West Island trial. Of course, if you want to participate in the trial, there was still a minimum strength limit, at least a master of the gold core stage. Otherwise, even if you go to the ancient battlefield ruins, you will only die, which was meaningless. Lin Yi glanced at the host platform. To his disappointment, he did not see the figure of Ning Xuefei, and Ning Shangling, the island lord of West Island, did not appear. The person who presided over this trial was the deputy island lord Yan Xinlan. Only experts below the nascent soul stage can participate in the trial. It's useless to hide your strength and muddle your way through. That's because we're not the ones to judge you. Instead, you have to go through a special teleportation array. This array is very peculiar. Only experts below the nascent soul stage can be teleported through. If you're a guest with a cultivation above that, then you don't have to waste your efforts in order to avoid looking for trouble. Yan Xinlan looked at the bustling crowd of people signing up and said indifferently. After she said this, there were indeed a few people in the crowd who retreated awkwardly. They did not necessarily want to fight for Ning Xuefei. It was estimated that they simply wanted to go to the ancient battlefield ruins. After all, there were not only all kinds of heavenly materials and earthly treasures, but if they were lucky they could also get the ancient inheritance. Even the masters of the profound ascending stage would be jealous. Lin Yi smiled slightly when he saw this. In front of great benefits there were really all kinds of people. After turning to Han Jingjing and Shanghai Laner and saying something, he squeezed into the crowd to sign up. Brother Ling? Lin Yi was signing. Suddenly someone behind him patted his shoulder. It was Qi Wenhan. You came? Lin Yi turned around and greeted Qi Wenhan. Only then did he notice that there was a girl standing beside Qi Wenhan. Looking at Qi Wenhan's somewhat awkward expression, he immediately understood that this girl should be this guy's sweetheart, the daughter of the ship king. Lin Yi's interest was immediately piqued. He couldn't help but take another look at this woman. He discovered that this woman was dressed very ordinarily and was not conspicuous at all in the crowd. Even her appearance could only be said to be ordinary. Overall, she gave people the feeling that she was a very ordinary woman. There was nothing special about her. Compared to Shangguan Laner, Ning Xuefei and Han Jingjing, there was simply no comparison at all. However, Lin Yi soon discovered something strange. Although the other party's flaw was very small, it still couldn't escape his eyes. The other party's appearance was disguised. Most people would have a hard time noticing this, but Lin Yi didn't just judge people by their appearance. He paid more attention to the other party's temperament. In this day and age it was very easy to disguise one's appearance, but it was very difficult to change one's temperament. At least, there was a clear difference between the temperament of the woman in front of him and her ordinary appearance. Based on this point, it could be concluded that the other party must have changed her appearance. However, this was not surprising. Female cultivators were in much more danger than male cultivators, not to mention that she was the daughter of the ship king. This time it was a secret mission. Disguising was a very normal method. Hello, my name is Lin Yi. I'm Brother Qi's friend. Lin Yi looked mischievously at Qi Wenhan and immediately introduced himself. My name is Xia Luoluo. You're very famous in our South Continent Sea. Wenhan always said that you two are good brothers. Today I finally meet you in person. The woman smiled naturally and nodded. Hee, I've embarrassed myself in front of Miss Xia. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows at Qi Wenhan. Previously, when he heard how self-abased Qi Wenhan was, he thought that this daughter of the ship king was high up and unapproachable. Now that the relationship between the two of them was so close, it seemed that he would be able to drink a wedding wine soon. Only now did Lin Yi remember to look at Qi Wenhan again. He found that this guy's temperament had been reborn. As expected, he had successfully condensed his nascent soul and became a true early-stage nascent soul master. No wonder his whole person had become so much more confident. Ahem, speaking of which, Brother Ling, are you signing up alone this time? Qi Wenhan was embarrassed by Lin Yi's stare. He was afraid that the other would say something he shouldn't. After all, the relationship between him and Xia Luoluo had not been made clear yet, so he could only quickly change the topic. Yeah, I'm not a couple like you. Looking at your posture, you should also sign up, right? Lin Yi said with a playful smile. Shanghai Laner and Han Jingjing wanted to accompany him, but the trial in West Island was full of danger. He couldn't guarantee the safety of the two women, so to be safe, he persuaded them to stay. After all, this was not a trip for fun. For Ning Xuefei's lifelong happiness, there must be no mistakes. Oh. Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo looked at each other, and after their eyes met, they quickly separated. Xia Luoluo blushed and lowered her head, while Qi Wenhan hurriedly said, "We are participating for the treasures of heaven and earth, not to compete with Brother Ling for the Princess of West Island. Don't get me wrong. I know that's why I said you two are a couple, right?" As soon as Lin Yi's voice fell, Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo's faces suddenly became redder, and they immediately lowered their heads and stopped talking. From time to time, they secretly glanced at each other, and as soon as their eyes met, they immediately separated. Seeing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but be amused. He deliberately said this to achieve this effect. When the relationship between a man and a woman reached a certain level, there would always be this layer of window paper. He was pushing the boat with the current in case Qi Wenhan would think too much and dawdle for too long. While speaking, Lin Yi had written his name on the registration list. At the same time, he roughly glanced at the list, and as a result, he found the names of two old acquaintances on it, Su Lingchong and Kang Ming. "Oh, they are really haunting me." Lin Yi smiled coldly. He had already noticed that during the welcoming banquet, these two guys seemed to deliberately want to discredit him, especially to destroy the relationship between him and Ning Xuefei. He didn't know what they were planning. Did they really want to become Ning Xuefei's husband? One was a man who was not a man, and the other was just a villain who couldn't do anything but spoil things. Did these two guys want to compete for Ning Xuefei? Are you kidding me? Chapter 46-59. As soon as she finished speaking, the whole audience suddenly quieted down. Everyone's eyes automatically focused on Yan Xinlan. Since it was about their lives, they didn't dare to take it lightly. N is an element of, the rule of this West Island trial is that there are no rules. The number of participants is unlimited, and the trial time is unlimited. It can be early or late. It's all up to you, Yan Xinlan said. The audience couldn't help but burst into an uproar. At the level of Yuanying stage, everyone present had participated in countless trials, big and small. Each trial must have its own rules. Some were strange, some were complicated, but it was the first time they encountered a trial without rules like what Yan Xinlan said. After hearing this, the quick-witted cultivators were already eager to have a try. One by one, they began to make all kinds of calculations. Since there were no rules, there was a lot of room for manipulation. If they didn't make a good plan, not only would they not be able to get the first place, they might even suffer a big loss. However, a small number of people, including Lin Yi, showed a cautious expression. No rules sounded very free, but it also showed the degree of danger of this trial. The legendary ancient battlefield ruins were likely to be so dangerous that no one was allowed to add rules. Survival was the only existence there. Seeing everyone's expression, Yan Xinlan continued, "In this West Island trial, you will be sent there through a special transmission array. As for the way back, you will also have to use the transmission array over there. As long as you attack the transmission array I with your true chi, you can activate the array. But I have to remind you that you'd better act according to your strength, otherwise you won't be able to come back." "Won't come back? What do you mean?" Everyone was shocked. The reason is very simple. The longer the time is delayed, the more true chi is needed to activate the transmission array. We have tested it before. Even a peak nascent soul master can't do it. Even a master at the peak of Yuanying stage can only delay for a month, because that will consume all his true chi. If the time is delayed for a longer time, the consequences can be imagined. Yan Xinlan said lightly. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Although there were no rules of the trial, this condition had naturally limited the trial time, which was at most 1 month. Because the peak of Yuanying stage was the highest strength to participate in the West Island trial, those with weaker strength would have a much shorter time. Vice Island Master Yin, there seems to be a loophole in your words. Since we can activate the teleportation as long as we input enough true chi, we just need to work together, right? Someone in the crowd suddenly asked. Ah, that's a beautiful thought. Unfortunately, it won't work because only one person can enter the teleportation formation at a time. If you want to activate the teleportation formation, you'll have to inject your true chi from the inside and ask someone else to help you from the outside. Or perhaps you'll have to wait for someone else to activate the teleportation formation. Both of these are impossible. Therefore, I hope that everyone won't be greedy. Otherwise, if time passes and you can't come out, then you really won't be able to come out. Yan Xinlan glanced at everyone and said. After he said that, the whole place fell silent. All of them looked uncertain. Everyone's time limit varied from person to person. If they didn't grasp the time well, it would be troublesome. If they came out too early, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. But if it was too late and he simply couldn't come out, then that would be even worse. It was truly a dilemma. Dare I ask Vice Island Master Yin? Since there were no rules in this trial, how would they determine who would win? It's about who could be the husband of the princess. There must be a clear standard, right? Otherwise, we won't be able to convince everyone. Someone suddenly asked loudly. As soon as he said that, all the people present suddenly became interested. Many of them had the same idea as Kang Ming, that was, they wanted to take advantage of this rare opportunity to reach the top in a single bound. It's very simple. Whoever gets the most treasures of heaven and earth in the trial will be the final winner. Yen Xinlan's answer was concise and comprehensive. Seeing everyone's different expressions, she added, "Of course, the treasures of heaven and earth you get are all yours. West Island doesn't want any of them, so you don't have to hide them. Every one of them has a corresponding value, which will be converted into spiritual jades according to the average price of the major chambers of commerce." After getting this answer, everyone stopped talking. Although the treasures of heaven and earth couldn't directly prove anything, in this dangerous trial of West Island, they could indirectly show a person's strength and ability, even including things like chance and luck. It was reasonable to use this to measure. Well, since everyone has no questions, please line up and get ready to start the transmission, Yen Xinlan announced immediately. Under the guidance of the disciple of West Island, everyone lined up cooperatively and was ready to go to the transmission formation. At this time there was a sudden uproar behind the line. Lin Yi heard the sound and looked over, and he was instantly stunned. At this time, everyone's eyes were focused on one person, which was Kang Ming. However, at this time he was already fully armed. Not only was he wearing an AI armor, but he was also carrying a laser cannon on his shoulder. He was arrogant and awe-inspiring, just like Megatron from the Transformers movies. In contrast, Su Lingchong, who was walking beside him, was ignored by everyone at all. What's this? Why does it look so fierce? Everyone looked at each other. They were all natives of Heaven Stage Island. Of course, they didn't know about this kind of super high-tech stuff. They all thought it was some kind of magic weapon. After all, the trial of West Island had never prohibited the use of weapons. At this moment, almost everyone had a puzzled expression on their faces. Although they didn't know what it was, they knew that it wasn't something to be trifled with just by looking at its awesome appearance. They couldn't help but feel a bit of fear in their hearts. These were all competitors that they had to face next. In contrast, the expressions of Lin Yi and Han Jingjing were a little subtle. Others didn't know it was awesome, but the two of them knew what it was. Needless to say, Han Jingjing, the technological geek, even Lin Yi was no stranger to these two things. After all, he was a killer. Such weapons were not only equipment that he might use in the mission, but also threats that he had to be extremely cautious and careful to deal with. How to deal with high-tech weapons was one of his key subjects. Looking at Kang Ming's swagger, especially his intelligent armor and laser cannon, Lin Yi was almost stunned. Although the Central Chamber of Commerce had already set off a wave of technology on Heaven Stage Island, he never dreamed that he would encounter such a situation in the trial of West Island. A high-level cultivator against a super high-tech weapon. What kind of dislocation was this? Chapter 4660. He suggested, "Why don't we bring Jing along for this trial? Although she won't be able to help in a fight, if this thing is real, I should be able to find a way to deal with it." Yes, I'll go too. Shanghai Laner was also eager to give it a try. I've never seen such a novel thing before. I must take a good look at it. When I get back, I'll get Grandpa to buy one too. Looks so fun. No? Lin Yi rejected without hesitation. Han Jingjing was still reliable, but Shanghai Laner was simply a troublemaker. She did not understand the situation at all, so he shook his head firmly. Both of you can't go. It's too dangerous. With your strength, you won't even have the ability to protect yourselves. If something happens, I won't be able to do anything. With Lin Yi's strength, he should be able to protect himself after entering. Even if something unexpected happened, there would always be room for maneuver. However, if Han Jingjing and Shanghai Laner were to be added, there might not even be a chance to save anyone. If one of them were to die, where would Lin Yi go to cry? But Han Jingjing was still worried. The AI armor was only a defensive equipment, so it was fine. However, Kang Ming's laser cannon was too dangerous. It looked like it had a long range and was extremely powerful. What if this guy used it to trick Lin Yi? She had always known that her big brother Lin Yi and Kang Ming Ming did not get along. To be precise, it was Kang Ming Ming who did not have good intentions. As for Lin Yi, although he knew that the laser cannon was a high-tech weapon, he had never actually come into contact with it, nor did he have any direct experience in dealing with it. Especially with this new unknown laser cannon. If they really fought, it was very likely that they would not know where to start. Even if it was just a moment of negligence or misjudgment, the consequences would be unimaginable. In this aspect, Han Jingjing could really come in handy. Although she had never come into contact with it before, as long as she saw how the laser cannon worked, she might be able to see its flaws in a very short period of time and come up with a countermeasure. At the very least, it would not let Lin Yi completely fall into a passive rhythm. There are no buts. There is no room for discussion. Both of you must stay here and wait for my return. It was rare for Lin Yi to be serious with Han Jingjing and Shangguan Laner. He would never agree to let the two women put themselves in danger for him. Seeing that Lin Yi was so determined, Han Jingjing and Shangguan Laner looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. They also knew that they might not be of any help to Lin Yi if they followed him. On the contrary, they would only be a burden. Alright then. Brother Lin Yi, take this with you. If anything happens, contact Jing Jing at any time. Jing Jing can help you plan. Han Jingjing said as she suddenly took out a small thing from her pocket. What is this? Shanghai Laner curiously moved closer. When Lin Yi saw it, his eyes twitched. His expression was even more shocked than when he saw the smart armor and laser cannon. The little thing in Han Jingjing's hand was actually a mobile phone. This thing has a signal? Lin Yi couldn't help but open his mouth wide. Speaking of which, he also put a mobile phone in his jade pendant space. He used it to secretly record the scene of Wuxia killing his master. However, apart from taking photos and videos, it had no other use. After all, there was no signal on this heavenly island. Well, Jing Jing asked Fei Fei to specially book this from the Central Chamber of Commerce. There was no signal at first. However, Jing Jing specially modified it and set up a small base station herself. She wrote in the authentication code so it can be used normally. However, the range is limited to the West Island because the base station's coverage is limited. Han Jingjing said in a matter-of-fact tone. She didn't know how much impact her words would have if they were heard by others. Fortunately, the people present were all natives of Heavenly Island. They didn't understand it all and were just confused. So advanced. However, Lin Yi couldn't close his mouth for a long time. Looking at Han Jingjing's careless expression, he was speechless. This kind of thing was child's play for Han Jingjing, but for others, it was simply a fantasy. At least, Lin Yi couldn't do this even if he was beaten to death. The mobile phone was just a camera in his hand. Anyway, I have nothing to do in the past 2 years in West Island, so I found something to study. At first, Fei Fei thought it was very novel. She wanted to call Jing Jing even though there was a room between them, but then she forgot about it. Han Jingjing said with a smile. You two haven't told me what this is? What do you mean by calling? Shanghai Laner was so anxious that she wanted to grab the mobile phone and take it apart to study it. Unfortunately, Han Jingjing handed it to Lin Yi first. This is a mobile phone, also a technological product of the secular world. Jing Jing will explain it to you later. Fei Fei has another one. I'll give it to you when we go back. Han Jingjing said with a smile. Oh? Shanghai Laner nodded like a curious baby, but her eyes were fixed on the mobile phone all the time. Her eyes lit up from time to time. Under the subtle influence of Lin Yi, this girl had been unable to extricate herself from the things of the secular world. Well, in this case I'll take it with me. It's convenient for me to contact you at any time. Maybe there will really be a time when I ask you for help, Jing Jing. Lin Yi nodded and took the mobile phone. In terms of dealing with high-tech weapons, Han Jingjing was more than enough to be an advisor. However, he was a little worried about whether it could still be used normally when he arrived at the ruins of the primeval battlefield. After all, according to Han Jingjing, although the small base station she set up covered West Island, it was very hard to say whether it could cover the ruins of the primeval battlefield. He didn't know how far that place was from West Island, and it was very likely that there would be no signal there. Of course, it was better to take it with him than not. If there was also a signal there, it would be a gain. Anyway, there would be no loss. While Lin Yi and Han Jingjing were talking, on the other side, Kang Ming Ming had already walked over under the gaze of all the people present. It seemed that he was enjoying the feeling of being the center of attention. To be honest, in front of a weirdo like Lin Yi, Kang Ming had always been a clown. He really had no chance to be in the limelight. This time, it was rare for him to show his face with the help of the intelligent armor and the laser cannon, which was really unprecedented. Ha, isn't this student Lin Yi? What, am I seeing things or am I confused? Why do I see a mobile phone? Do you think this is the secular world? You can still make phone calls? When Kang Ming saw the mobile phone in Lin Yi's hand, he suddenly laughed and felt very superior. A normal original infant stage cultivator was already very scary. It was still unknown whether or not they could be killed by the laser cannons. Not to mention Lin Yi, who was far above a normal original infant stage cultivator. It seemed that Kang Ming really didn't have a good memory. He had suffered so many losses in the past, he was really a rare weirdo. Lin Yi smiled. He was too lazy to waste his breath on Kang Ming. If he had the time, he might as well talk to Han Jingjing and Shangguan Laner. He didn't have the habit of wasting his breath on an idiot. However, what surprised Lin Yi was that suddenly, a woman's voice floated over. What is Ultraman? There was actually someone who took the initiative to talk to him? Lin Yi was stunned. He turned his head and looked towards the direction of the voice. A woman wearing a veil was slowly approaching him. Although he couldn't see her face clearly, her figure was extremely exquisite. But her figure was extremely exquisite. Even the wide robe couldn't hide the graceful ups and downs, which made people couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. Not only Lin Yi. At this time, everyone present was looking at the woman who suddenly spoke, especially the men present. They couldn't help but swallow their saliva and their eyes were hot. Shangguan Laner and Han Jingjing were both stunning. They were the kind of stunners that people couldn't bear to desecrate. Ordinary women couldn't be compared with them at all. They would only be dwarfed. Only the princess of West Island, Ning Xuefei, could share the limelight with them. Of course, in terms of beauty, Ning Shangling, the owner of West Island, was not inferior to them. It was just that the power aura of this super big shot was too dazzling. Normal people wouldn't think about her beauty. However, the woman who appeared this time. Although she didn't show her face in terms of figure alone, she was already as stunning as Shangguan Laner. Even because she was wearing a veil, she was more attractive than Shangguan Laner and the others. For men, the unknown was always full of mystery and imagination, which made people unable to stop. Hi beauty, I'm Kang Ming. This is my divine armor. It's very powerful. How about we form a team after we go in? I'll take you with me. I promise you'll come back with a full load. Kang Ming's eyes were shining and his saliva was flowing. He couldn't hide his perverted look. Although there were such stunning beauties in front of him, he didn't dare to touch Shangguan Laner. Han Jingjing was obviously Lin Yi's woman. As for Ning Xuefei, he had to wait until he won the trial. He could only look at these stunning beauties. But now a strange woman suddenly appeared, a stunner who was probably not less beautiful than the three women. How could he not go crazy? Su Lingchong, who was not far away, couldn't help but frown when he heard Kang Ming's invitation. However, after taking a look at the woman, he still didn't say anything. Ever since the plan was reported to the higher-ups, although Su Lingchong was still the person in charge, the actual leader had become Kang Xiaoming. So Kang Xiaoming had more or less the right to speak. Moreover, it was pleasing to the eye to have such a beautiful woman with him. To any man it was a good thing. Even an incomplete man like Su Lingchong wouldn't reject it. Oh? The woman looked at Kang Ming, who had a perverted look on his face and nodded non-committally. She turned to look at Lin Yi and said, "Then can we form a team to do the trial together?" As soon as she said that, the crowd was in an uproar again. All the men looked at Lin Yi with envy, jealousy, and hatred. They looked like they wanted to eat him up. There were already so many stunning beauties by his side. Now, a new one actually took the initiative to talk to him. Damn it, this guy's luck with women was too good. Was there any justice in this world? How could these single dogs that no one cared about endure this? Chapter 46-62. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in forming a team. Lin Yi refused directly in front of everyone, without any hesitation from the beginning to the end. Fuck. Everyone was about to go crazy. It was already surprising that the woman took the initiative to talk to him. They didn't expect that Lin Yi would refuse her without saying anything. What kind of world was this? Oh? The woman couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. She continued to stare at Lin Yi for a few seconds and didn't insist too much. Perhaps she also realized that it was too inexplicable to pester Lin Yi like this. However, what made people look at each other was that although the woman didn't continue to form a team with Lin Yi, she didn't leave after being refused. Instead, she took advantage of the situation and lined up behind Lin Yi. It really made people speechless. Beauty, this brat has eyes but can't see the jade. He's blind. Don't bother with him. How about you think about me? My strength is not comparable to this kind of embroidered pillow. I promise you that everything you want will come true. What do you think? Kang Ming still didn't give up and kept talking behind the woman. However, the woman didn't pay attention to him and just continued to line up behind Lin Yi in silence. She looked up and looked at Lin Yi from time to time as if she had a deep meaning. With such a pair of eyes looking at him from behind, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. He couldn't help but be secretly vigilant. What is this girl doing? Why do I feel that she has ulterior motives? While the woman was looking at Lin Yi, Shanghai Laner and Han Jingjing were also looking at her. From time to time, they whispered to each other and laughed like silver bells. They didn't mind the woman's unexpected behavior at all, they were just full of curiosity. While they were talking, the crowd had lined up in front of the transmitting formation. This was the side courtyard of the Island Master's palace, so it was heavily guarded. West Island Masters with great momentum surrounded them from all directions. Although they were all female cultivators, no one dared to act rashly because of their soaring momentum. Well, after you have verified your identity, you can line up to be teleported. Good luck to you. After Yen Xinlan finished speaking, she stepped aside, and the following matters were handed over to the two West Island deacons. One was responsible for verifying the identity, and the other was responsible for guiding the teleportation. At this time, no one dared to look for trouble, so naturally there was no disturbance. Everyone was teleported in an orderly manner, and soon it was Lin Yi's turn. When he checked his identity and was about to enter the teleportation array, he finally knew the identity of the veiled woman behind him. This girl's name was Hui Yudi, and she was a student from Dawn Proud Yellow Stage Women's College in the East Continent. However, it was unknown whether she was the disciple of Lu Ziyu, the deputy dean. Since she was able to follow Lu Ziyu to West Island, her status must not be too low. Little junior brother, you can do it. Feifei and we are all waiting for you. Seeing Lin Yi walk into the transmission array, Laner, who was stopped outside, waved her hands desperately. But when she saw Lin Yi's strange expression, she quickly realized the ambiguity in her words and blushed. Ning Xuefei was waiting for Lin Yi to become her husband, but what was she waiting for? Brother Lin Yi, be careful. Keep in touch with Jingjing at any time. Han Jingjing made a gesture to make a phone call, which made everyone else confused. The ruins of the ancient battlefield were completely isolated from West Island, and people could only enter and exit through the transmission array. How could they keep in touch at any time? Was it a dream? Don't worry and wait for me to come back. Lin Yi smiled and waved to the two women, then turned around and entered the transmission array. After looking around a little, this transmission array was not as big as he had imagined. It was a little smaller than the ones that Lin Yi had experienced before. Each time it could only be used by one person. In particular, the transmission array that he had seen before was powered by the spiritual qi provided by the spiritual jade, but this one had to be powered by the input of true qi. It could be said that each had its own advantages and disadvantages. Facing the stone slab in the middle, Lin Yi slowly input true qi, and the transmission array was opened. Because now the trial had just started, the transmission array did not need much true qi. After a while, the transmission array was fully activated. Lin Yi only felt that his eyes were shaking, and the surrounding scene was completely different. Ancient battlefield. Although he was still standing in the transmission array, Lin Yi had already felt a terrible aura coming to his face. All kinds of murderous aura, hostility and ferociousness were all mixed together. Under the pressure of such a terrible aura, the weaker people could not even breathe, let alone come out to take the trial. Sure enough, this was an arena specially built for the strong. The name of the ancient battlefield was really not in vain. Walking out of the transmission array, Lin Yi looked around a little. Except for the terrible aura everywhere, he could not see anything special in this place. Because from the terrain, it was a long and narrow canyon. Except for the cliffs on both sides, he could only see the gray sky above his head. At this time, the people who had been transmitted here before did not leave, because there were two female cultivators of West Island guarding the exit of the transmission array. Looking at their aura, they were both at the peak of the nascent soul realm. It was obvious that they had been sent here in advance and seemed to have something to say. After a while, all the participants had been transmitted. When everyone appeared in the canyon, one of the female cultivators of West Island said, "We will wait here for you for a month. When you come back, we will guide you to attack the formation key here. As for other things, you can only pray for luck." After hearing this, everyone instantly understood that these two female cultivators of West Island were afraid that they would fight at the entrance of the transmission array, so they specially sent them here to supervise and maintain order. But this was understandable. The key to the trial of West Island was the transmission array. Once the transmission array failed or was destroyed, there would be no way to enter the relics of the ancient battlefield. No matter who it was, they would pay more attention to the protection. If someone with ulterior motives did this kind of thing that harmed others without benefiting himself, it would be a great loss for West Island. What was more, once in the later stage of the trial, some people were trapped here because they missed the transmission time. It was hard to guarantee that they would not have some ideas that they shouldn't have. Maybe they would attack others with the idea of dragging others down with them. In this way, the trial would be completely meaningless. How could West Island explain to other forces then? After all, these were the elites of each island. If they died here because they were not as good as others, there was nothing to say. But if this kind of reason caused everyone to die with them, no matter what, it would not be justifiable. At that time, West Island would become the target of public criticism. Chapter 46-63. Everyone looked at each other, calculated silently, and then walked towards the exits on both sides of the canyon. From this moment on, they were competitors. Even if there was no big prize like the Princess of West Island, they had to be very vigilant just for the natural treasures. Killing people and robbing their treasures was a common thing, so they had to be on guard. Brother Ling, let's go together? Chi Wenhan took Xia Luoluo and moved closer to Lin Yi. With his relationship with Lin Yi, this was a matter of course. I don't care, but Brother Chi, are you sure this is the right thing to do? Lin Yi looked at the two mischievously, and his expression was a little playful. Oh. Chi Wenhan couldn't help but blush. The trial of West Island was a rare opportunity for him and Xia Luoluo to be alone. Maybe this trial could make their relationship warm up quickly, which was his dream. If there was a third will like Lin Yi in the process, it would be hard to say. If the three of them huddled together, it would be safe, but it would be a waste of such a good opportunity. Chi Wenhan also said that Xia Luoluo, the daughter of the Ship King, had no lack of pursuers. If they missed this opportunity, they might not find a good opportunity to cultivate their relationship in the future. Chi Wenhan secretly glanced at Xia Luoluo and found that she blushed, lowered her head and didn't speak. For a moment he was a little confused about her meaning. Was she acquiescing or was she just shy? Of course this was acquiescing. Chi Wenhan couldn't see clearly, but as a bystander Lin Yi saw it clearly. He immediately smiled and said, "Actually, I have something important to do this time, so we'd better act separately. You two be careful, I'll leave first." Lin Yi creating opportunities for Chi Wenhan was actually just one aspect. The main reason was that he didn't want to get involved in some things. Kang Ming got that set of technological equipment, and Lin Yi didn't believe that he would let go of this good opportunity to deal with him. "Oh, okay, Brother Ling, take care." Chi Wenhan nodded quickly. He couldn't help but feel very excited. Now he finally had a chance to be alone with his sweetheart. It was a godsend. Lin Yi chuckled, waved at the two and turned to leave. After separating from Chi Wenhan and Chi Wenhan, Lin Yi looked around before choosing an exit. He'd only taken a few steps when he realized that someone was following him. Was that Huiyuti from before? Lin Yi couldn't help but turn to look at her and couldn't help but frown slightly. What does this chick want to do? Seeing Lin Yi's gaze sweep over, Huiyuti's eyes lit up. She seemed as though she was about to speak, but someone suddenly interrupted. "Miss Hua, are you really not going to form a team with me? Why don't you reconsider? When the time comes, you can ask for heavenly materials and earthly treasures. I will definitely not treat you unfairly." Kang Xiaoming was still acting like a pervert. He didn't give up on chasing Huiyuti. It seemed like this guy was really infatuated with her. In his dictionary, the word infatuation was written all over him. In his dictionary, picking up girls required a shameless and shameless style. Once he found a target, he had to stick to her like dog skin plaster, and wouldn't let go until he reached his goal. "I'm sorry, you should find someone else." Huiyuti's attitude this time was not as ambiguous as before. He immediately shook his head and refused. Kang Ming still didn't give up. He wanted to catch up and say something, but at this time, Su Lingchong suddenly coughed lightly. His eyes were obviously angry and impatient. He indeed didn't object to forming a team with a beauty like Huiyuti, who had such a background. But Kang Ming's attitude made him a little unhappy. The moment he came up, he was pestering a girl and wouldn't let go. Did he still want to do proper work? Under helplessness, Kang Ming could only stop his footsteps resentfully. Although he was the main force of this operation, Su Lingchong was his boss after all. Once he made this young Master Su unhappy, he could kill him with one word. He couldn't afford to offend him. Looking at the situation behind him, Lin Yi smiled indifferently and then walked forward. He couldn't be bothered to meddle in other people's business. However, at this time Huoyuti suddenly ran up to Lin Yi. Ignoring the surprised eyes of others in the distance, she actually took the initiative to stretch out her hand and pull the corner of Lin Yi's clothes. Looking at Huoyuti's pitiful look, Lin Yi suddenly frowned. He was not like Kang Ming who couldn't move his legs when he saw a beauty. He said unhappily, "What do you want? I don't have time to be a fool. If you want to fish for a fool, go find that guy. Don't you see that he is so proactive?" "What is a fool?" Huoyuti couldn't help but blink her eyes strangely. She turned her head to look at the resentful Kang Ming behind her. She looked at Lin Yi curiously and said, "Is his name a fool? But didn't he just introduce himself as Kang Ming?" Lin Yi shook his head speechlessly. For a moment he didn't know how to explain. What was up with this strange woman? Was she really stupid or was she pretending to be stupid? Although he didn't feel any threat at the moment, no matter how he looked at it, this woman had an ulterior motive, right? Damn it. Lin Yi, how dare you call me a fool? Believe it or not, I will blow you up with one shot. Kang Ming, who was behind, heard this clearly. He immediately stomped his feet and scolded loudly. He even aimed the laser cannon at Lin Yi. If it wasn't for the orders from the higher-ups, he really wanted to fire the cannon. Taking the initiative to pick up a girl and being fished for a fool were two completely different things. Any man wouldn't be happy to hear this, let alone Kang Ming, who was bursting with confidence. Being aimed at by the laser cannon, Lin Yi couldn't help but have a subtle feeling in his heart. He actually felt a trace of threat from Kang Ming, which he hadn't felt for a long time. It was obvious that the laser cannon couldn't be taken lightly. Although he was secretly afraid, Lin Yi only glanced at Kang Ming with disdain on the surface. He couldn't be bothered to respond at all. Kang Ming suddenly exploded with anger. Before this, Lin Yi ignored him arrogantly. He had no choice but to endure it. But now that he had the laser cannon and the intelligent armor in his hands, he still dared to put on such a haughty look. This bastard really didn't know how he died. Humph. Don't be complacent, kid. If it weren't for the people of West Island watching here, I would definitely destroy you with one shot. Kang Ming pointed his middle finger at him fiercely. He turned his head and said to Huoyuti, "Beauty, you'd better not look for this kid. He is a eunuch and doesn't know how to appreciate you. You'd better follow me." When Kang Ming said this, he didn't feel a sudden chill behind him. He was also bewitched. Saying that he was a eunuch in front of Su Lingchong was like scolding a monk as a bald donkey. Chapter 46-64. Kang Ming curled his lips resentfully. Feeling Su Lingchong's unkind gaze behind him, he shivered and quickly turned his head to leave. His superiors spent so much effort to get him super equipment such as laser cannons and intelligent armor, not to let him come here to pick up girls. Since he couldn't pick up any beauties, he'd better hurry to collect the treasures of heaven and earth. Time was limited and he couldn't dawdle for too long. If Lin Yi won first place this time, his superiors might punish him. After getting rid of the annoying fly Kang Ming, Huoyuti was obviously relieved, but then Lin Yi said in front of her, "Then I'm leaving. Don't follow me if there's nothing else, or I'll think you're up to no good." "Wait a minute." Huoyuti shouted anxiously. "What else do you want?" Lin Yi was really impatient this time. He really couldn't understand why this woman was sticking to him. He looked at her angrily and said, "I don't have time to talk to you now. See you later." After that, Lin Yi stepped forward directly. His intuition told him that he would definitely be in trouble if this woman stuck to him. He couldn't make any mistakes in this West Island trial test, and he didn't have time to waste with her. "You have the constitution of 5 elements?" Huoyuti suddenly asked at this time. "What?" Lin Yi stopped in his tracks in shock, subconsciously looking around to make sure that no one was paying attention to them. He then turned his attention back to Huoyuti, re-evaluating her. This woman from the East Continent was able to see through his spirit roots attribute with just one look. Could it be that she had some sort of golden finger in this area? Although it was not a big deal to be known by others, at least it wouldn't be a substantial threat. It was still a surprise. After all, this could only be tested with very professional props. Lin Yi had never heard of such a talent that could be known at a glance before. Although he was shocked in his heart, Lin Yi's face was still calm, and he said with an unfathomable expression, "What constitution of 5 elements? What's that?" A full attribute spirit root is also known as a constitution of the 5 elements. Hui Yudi stared fixedly at Lin Yi. It seemed that she had already confirmed this matter. Common? Lin Yi couldn't help but curl his lips. He knew that he couldn't hide this matter from the other party. He looked Hui Yudi up and down and said, I think only the secular world calls her that. No one on Heaven Stage Island calls her a 5 elements physique. Alright, that's how it's called in the secular world. Hui Yudi nodded in agreement. You know about the secular world? Lin Yi was surprised to hear this. His words were just a subconscious test. He did not expect to get such a shocking result. This chick from the East Continent was getting weirder and weirder. She inexplicably came up to him and pestered him. She was also able to point out his 5 elements physique with a single sentence. She even knew that this was what the secular world called it. There were so many suspicious points mixed together. Anyone would find it strange. Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder if this woman was sent by some organization to get close to him. I know. Hui Yudi nodded again as if it was a matter of course. Lin Yi's eyes were still full of suspicion. There were many people on Heaven Stage Island who knew about the secular world. However, there shouldn't be many who knew about the 5 elements physique. He immediately said in a deep voice, Then you don't know what Ultraman is? What is Kaizi? Who are you? I really don't know. I only heard about the secular world from others. She told me that you have a 5 elements physique. That's why I specifically asked you to confirm it. Hui Yudi's words were shocking. Who is she? Lin Yi was suddenly shocked. This matter was even more shocking than the fact that she had a golden finger that could see through the attribute of the spirit root. From what this chick said, she actually knew someone who was familiar with him. I don't know her specific identity. She is just a woman who was teleported from the secular world to the East Continent. Hui Yudi blinked and said. Whether she was telling the truth or hiding something, it was unknown. What? Hearing this, even the usually calm Lin Yi couldn't help but change his expression. There were only a few people who were teleported from the secular world to Heaven Stage Island. Although there were many enemies and unrelated outsiders, since the other party was a woman, the range of targets was very small. The range of targets was already very small. Perhaps it was those who had a close relationship with him. For women to go from the secular world to Heaven Stage Island, the best place to go was the West Island, followed by the North Island and the Middle Island. And if he had to find the worst place, it would be the chaotic South Continent and the powerful and mysterious East Continent. Wang Xinyan was purely lucky to have met the Eastern Sea Divine Nun, which was why her journey was smooth sailing. Otherwise, who knew how miserable her life would be if she entered that ruthless school? Thinking about this, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a little nervous. This woman from the secular world was very likely to be his confidant. It was very likely that she was his confidant. Otherwise, she wouldn't have mentioned him, let alone the 5 elements constitution. Lin Yi took a deep breath to calm himself down. What's her name? I don't know. I only know that after she was teleported to the East Continent, she was lucky enough to be accepted by Dawn Pride Girls Academy, but things didn't go so well after that. Hui Yudi said, looking at Lin Yi's changing expression. How so? Lin Yi's heart tightened. Not long after, she offended someone she shouldn't have. She was the granddaughter of one of the vice headmasters of our Morning Pride Academy. As a result, she was forcefully charged with a crime and thrown into the dungeon. After being tortured, she spilled everything she could and couldn't say. That's how I found out about you, Hui Yudi said honestly. What? Lin Yi was startled once more. He guessed that Dongzhou was a dangerous place, even after entering the academy. Then where's she? What does she look like? How would I know? I didn't pay attention to her at first, and after that she was beaten beyond recognition. Of course I wouldn't know. Hui Yudi shook her head. That. Lin Yi panicked. If this woman was an outsider who had nothing to do with him, it wouldn't be a big deal. But the problem was that she might be his confidant. How could Lin Yi remain calm after hearing this? Fortunately, he didn't bring the spirit bird this time. Otherwise, he might have flown from the West Island to the East Continent. Chapter 4665. Lin Yi was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he looked up at Hui Yudi with an unfriendly expression and said in a cold tone, So, you also participated in the torture, right? No. Hui Yudi shook her head. No, how did you know? Lin Yi's eyes sharpened and he asked. I overheard it when I secretly let her go. She looked so pitiful to me, but I haven't seen her since. Hui Yudi pursed her lips and said, Phew. Hearing this, Lin Yi let out a long sigh of relief. Originally, he felt that this girl was inexplicable and even a little vigilant, but now his impression of her became much better, and his eyes became much kinder. No matter who the woman in the secular world was, whether it was his confidant Qin Shi or Rock Candy Song Lingrui Tiandai, or even the highest elder of Snow Valley, Lin Yi didn't want anything to happen to them, because each of them had a direct or indirect relationship with him. What's more, Hui Yudi had saved this woman's life. Just because of this kindness, Lin Yi wouldn't ignore her like before. No matter who this woman was, Lin Yi felt that he should be indebted to her. Although he said that, Lin Yi was secretly grateful, but at the same time he was shocked. That woman offended the deputy dean's granddaughter, and as a result, she was locked up and tortured unscrupulously. It could be seen how dangerous the environment of East Continent College was. Hui Yudi dared to release this woman without permission. Wasn't that making an enemy of the deputy dean's granddaughter? Didn't the deputy dean's granddaughter make trouble for you after you secretly released her? Lin Yi looked her up and down and said. At the beginning, he had guessed that this girl's identity might not be simple. Otherwise, she wouldn't be qualified to follow him to West Island, and she wouldn't dare to oppose the deputy dean's granddaughter. First, she didn't see me release her with her own eyes. Second, I am Lu Ziyu's direct disciple. Hui Yudi said lightly. No wonder. Lin Yi suddenly came to a realization. Of these two reasons, the latter was the key. Since the other party could casually pin a crime on someone, it didn't matter whether he saw it or not. And the Lu Ziyu that the other party was talking about was the deputy dean who was representing Morning Pride Academy on this diplomatic mission to the West Island. The Heavenly Island had always adhered to the ancient customs. The status and importance of a direct disciple was not the slightest bit inferior to those descendants who were related by blood. In fact, it was often even more so. This was because not all of his descendants would be able to achieve greatness, and there were even fewer who could truly inherit his legacy. However, personal disciples were different. They were existences that were destined to inherit his legacy. They were the inheritors that the big shots had spent countless efforts and energy on. He didn't know whether the other party pretended to be so innocent in order to deliberately confuse him, or whether she really didn't have any bad intentions. Lin Yi thought that he had a good eye for people, but in the face of this Hui Yudi who suddenly appeared, he was really a little uncertain. If all this was purely an act, then her acting skills were too good. But if the other party was so simple and natural, it didn't seem to be completely so. Could it be that she was both? Whatever you want. My patience is limited. Don't beat around the bush anymore. What do you want me to do? Lin Yi simply asked straightforwardly. Even if he knew that the other party might have saved his confidant, Lin Yi really had no time to waste at the moment. If he wanted to get the first place in this West Island trial, he must race against time. Well, I heard Master mention that in the ruins of the ancient battlefield in West Island, there seems to be a place where the Thunder Shen vine grows. Hui Yudi no longer hid, and her eyes were shining. Thunder Shen vine? What's that? Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. He couldn't help but frown a little. The name sounded a little familiar. Hui Yudi couldn't help but look at Lin Yi. It seemed that he didn't even know this kind of thing. She was stunned for a moment and then said, "That's the main material for refining the Thunder Shen pills?" Thunder Shen pill? Yes. Lin Yi finally remembered that the Thunder Shen pill was a necessary pill to promote to the profound ascension stage. Although he was now at the peak of the early stage of Yuanying stage, and it seemed that there was still a long time before he reached the profound ascension stage, but with the promotion speed of his strongest Yuanying stage, this time was much shorter than ordinary people. Especially with a fortuitous encounter like the 5-poison swamp, he might reach it in the blink of an eye. Chapter 4666. In the Foundation Establishment stage there was the Foundation Establishment pill, then the Gold Core pill and the Soul Gathering pill. However, although the Thunder Shen pill was a necessary pill to break through to the Profound Ascension stage, its nature was completely different from the first 3 pills. There was no other reason. The difference between the Profound Ascension stage and the Nascent Soul stage was like heaven and earth. Regardless of whether it was the original infant stage or the previous stage, most people had developed the habit of taking pills to break through. In fact, this concept had already been deeply ingrained in their hearts. But in reality, as long as one had enough talent and perseverance, every realm could be broken through naturally. In principle, there was no need for any medicinal pills. But the Profound Ascension stage was different. As mentioned before, in order to advance to the Profound Ascension stage, one must have more than 2 types of spirit root attributes, and need to fuse 2 types of true qi to advance to the next level. Although this step was extremely difficult, it was the same as the previous stages and did not require any pills. When two types of spiritual roots weave together, they could trigger a lightning tribulation. Thunder retribution was a kind of heavenly punishment. It was the ruthless obliteration of the heavens to those who defy the heavens. In other words, before the profound ascension stage, even if one reached the nascent soul stage, they could only be regarded as powerful but not heaven-defying. After all, he hadn't even experienced heavenly punishment. How could he say that he was heaven-defying? Since it was a god's punishment, it was no small matter. Cultivators at the peak of the original level would not be able to withstand it. No matter how powerful the super geniuses were, they would need to take a life-saving elixir if they wanted to survive the lightning tribulation, and that was the profound thunder elixir. It could be said that having a Thunder Shen core was equivalent to having a ticket to the profound ascension stage. This did not mean that you could directly open the door, but at least you could guarantee that when you tried to open the door, you would not be killed by the guards. Thinking of this, Lin Yi couldn't help but be moved. If the other party said something else, he might not be interested. However, this Thunder Shen Ratan happened to be what he needed. In fact, even if he didn't look for it this time, he would find a way to get it in the near future. He might as well take this opportunity to push the boat along with the current. After all, the rarity of the Thunder Shen Ratan was no less than that of the nascent ginseng. It was not easy for Lin Yi to inquire about any valuable information by himself, let alone to really obtain it. That's good. How do we split it after we find it? Lin Yi immediately said straightforwardly. Determining the distribution of benefits was the most crucial prerequisite for cooperation. If they couldn't even reach an agreement on this point, then there was no need to continue talking. It was purely a waste of time. 3-7, Huiyuti blurted out without hesitation. It seemed that she had already thought about it. You take 30 and I take 70? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. Impossible? Huiyuti immediately choked. Looking at Lin Yi's matter-of-fact expression, she could only shake her head in annoyance. You clearly know. Forget it. Without saying another word, Lin Yi turned around and left. It was as if the Thunder Shen Ratan was not essential to him. He did not want it at all. It was simply wishful thinking to use this little temptation to make him fall into a dilemma. Big brother Lin Yi? Huiyuti pursed her lips and looked at Lin Yi with watery eyes. Her tone and demeanor were actually exactly the same as Han Jingjing's. It was obvious that she had deliberately observed and imitated them. After all, for a beauty like her, no man could resist her coquettish attacks, unless the other party was not a man. At this time, if it was any other man, they would have long been head over heels in love. Not to mention 30 or 70, even if they were to work hard for her, they would not hesitate to nod and agree. Unfortunately, Lin Yi was an exception. Don't waste your effort. I don't fall for it. Lin Yi looked at her coldly. His gaze clearly contained some impatience and even a hint of warning. This caused Huiyuti to be startled and subconsciously covered her mouth. Didn't Master say that this move would work 100% of the time when dealing with men? Why didn't it work? Huiyuti could not help but feel a little nervous in her heart. She did not expect that Lin Yi was only putting on a stern face at this moment. In fact, there was a slight palpitation in his heart for no reason. However, he concealed it very well so others could not see it. At the end of the day, Huiyuti's master was not wrong. A beauty's coquettish attacks were effective on any man, especially when used by an absolute beauty like her. At this moment, separated by a veil, only a pair of bright and delicate eyes clearly made Lin Yi feel a moving charm. It was only because he had a firm will and was long used to beauties like Han Jingjing. This woman was definitely a beauty at the level of calamity. Lin Yi secretly raised his guard. If the other party took off her veil at this moment, he really did not dare to say that he would definitely be able to hold on. Although he would not completely lose his mind, once he felt a sense of pity, he might subconsciously give in to the other party. All right then, in order to show my sincerity, I will take a step back. 40-60. Seeing that Lin Yi still did not move, Huiyuti could only choose to give in. In her heart she was speechless. Could it be that what Kang Ming said before was true? Was this guy really a eunuch? Otherwise, why would her coquettish attacks have no effect at all? Bye-bye. The corner of Lin Yi's mouth twitched as if he had completely lost his patience. He immediately quickened his pace to shake off the other party. What do you mean? Huiyuti saw this and was immediately shocked. She hurriedly chased after him and asked, It means to say goodbye. If this is your so-called sincerity, then we have nothing to talk about. Lin Yi said without turning his head. Hearing this, Huiyuti stopped in her tracks. Her expression fluctuated as she looked at Lin Yi's back. She could not help but feel a sense of helplessness in her heart. Why is this guy so stubborn? 50 to 50. This is already a sky-high price. It is also my bottom line. I cannot go any higher. Huoyuti clenched her teeth and said. However, her eyes were filled with the determination to bargain with a small peddler. She was currently at a bottleneck and urgently needed the Thunder Shen pill. If she missed this opportunity, she did not know where she would have to go next time to get the Thunder Shen vine. If she was stuck at a bottleneck for too long, it would drag a genius into a waste. She could not afford to delay it. Let's go with what you said before. Otherwise there is no need to talk. Lin Yi stopped in his tracks and said. At the same time the corner of his mouth slightly hooked up. When he said 3 to 7, it naturally had to be reversed. The other party would take 3 and he would take 7. Although his impression of this little girl had improved a lot, this was a different matter. In this kind of matter Lin Yi would not foolishly give in. After all, the other party was just a stranger that he had never met. Lin Yi's generosity had always been given to friends and people close to him. He would never give alms to strangers, even if the other party was a peerless beauty. Chapter 46-67. Forget it if we can't reach an agreement. Lin Yi shook his head and continued to walk forward. Although he said so, he was very sure in his heart that this girl would definitely take the bait. The reason why he dared to extort her so openly was that Lin Yi was sure that Huoyuti would take the bait. It was true that only the other party knew the information, but Lin Yi was 100% sure that the process of getting the Thunder Shen Rattan would be very difficult, and he must help her. Otherwise, why didn't she do it alone? Even if the other party let go of the secular woman whose identity he didn't know, Lin Yi didn't think that Huoyuti would be so kind. The Thunder Shen Rattan was an extremely rare treasure of heaven and earth. She would share it with others for no reason. Was she so free? Since the other party deliberately found Lin Yi, it meant that she needed to rely on him. Therefore Lin Yi wasn't afraid to scare her away at all. Besides, the other party's need for the Thunder Shen Rattan was far more urgent than his. If he didn't take advantage of this ready-made opportunity, Lin Yi would feel sorry for himself. As expected, Huoyuti stared blankly for a long time. Finally, she squeezed out 2 words from between her teeth. Dealed? Very well, then it's a happy decision. Lin Yi smiled brightly, but facing this so-called happy way of sharing, Huoyuti's expression was so depressed that she was about to cry. She even couldn't help but wonder if she had found the wrong person to cooperate with Lin Yi this time. As soon as the 2 of them reached an agreement, 3 people, 2 men and a woman, suddenly came not far behind them. They were talking and laughing as they walked, and they didn't look as serious and cautious as the others. It seemed that the nature of this trial in West Island was like a sightseeing tour for them. There was no difficulty at all. Hey, isn't this senior sister Hua? Why didn't you wait for us? The one who spoke was the woman. After seeing Huoyuti from a distance, she smiled and took the lead to walk over. At the same time the other 2 men also smiled and followed them. It seemed that they were Huoyuti's acquaintances. However, after seeing these 3 people, Huoyuti's face changed, but it was not easy to be noticed by others because of the veil. Then her eyes became indifferent again. The relationship between this chick and the 3 people behind her doesn't seem to be harmonious. Lin Yi saw Huoyuti's reaction and turned around to size up the 3 people behind him. The woman in the lead was wearing a tight-fitting cyan soft armor, which vividly displayed her exquisite and well-proportioned figure, which was quite tempting. Although her face was not as stunning as Shangguan Laner and the others, she was still a rare beauty. However, in Lin Yi's eyes she was inferior. No matter how he looked at it, Lin Yi felt that the other party had a frivolous and overbearing aura that he couldn't get rid of. It affected his entire temperament and made him feel very awkward. Therefore, although he looked beautiful, he didn't feel the slightest bit of admiration or amazement. As for the 2 men who came with the woman, they were both handsome young men with bright and cheerful appearances. They should be the type that was popular with girls. Moreover, looking at the way they walked and their expressions, he knew that they were definitely the type that felt good about themselves. Perhaps they had the so-called halo of a genius on their heads. It was a pity that Lin Yi only took a glance at them and didn't care about them. For men, the influence of appearance on their image was far less than the unique aura that was formed unconsciously. According to Lin Yi's experience, any man who had achievements in a certain area would definitely form a unique aura. The aura of these 2 men was at most a little better than that of ordinary people. It was far from leaving a deep impression. In Lin Yi's opinion, they weren't even as good as the Ragged King. So it's junior sister Jelly? Huoyuti nodded indifferently. Then she changed the topic. However, why should I wait for you? The woman called Jelly's expression changed when she heard this. Her cheeks unnaturally hesitated for a moment. She put away her fake smile and looked coldly at Huiyudi. What? It seems that senior sister Hu doesn't welcome me? Could it be that you've turned a deaf ear to the dean's words? Before we set off, she specifically told us to work together. Senior sister Hua, you don't even care about the dean because of your identity, do you? Huiyudi squinted her eyes slightly, and the surrounding atmosphere suddenly became cold. Linny could see that this girl really didn't get along with Jelly. Her impatience was obvious. Haha, junior sister Yudi and junior sister Jelly, you don't have to be so mean to each other. You two are known as the Morning Pride twins. In a place like West Island you should work together. Seeing this, the taller man next to them quickly smoothed things over. Right, we're all from East Continent. It's the right thing to work together. We can't be laughed at by outsiders, which will damage the image of our East Continent college. Another man echoed. While the two were talking, their eyes fell on Linny. Although they didn't say anything directly, the arrogance in their bones and the contempt from the bottom of their hearts were really infuriating. However, Linny didn't bother to pay attention to them. Hearing what the two said, Huiyudi couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. She looked at them and didn't say anything. No one knew what she was thinking. Yes, senior sister Hua, the two senior brothers are right. You can't ruin the image of our Morning Pride Academy. Jelly's face showed the same kind of smile again. She looked at Linny up and down maliciously. She curled her lips and said, Senior sister Hua, aren't you always proud and arrogant, and claim to be an untouchable ice lotus? You've only left East Continent for a few days. How come you've hooked up with a wild man? Even if you're interested, you should at least pay attention to the image of our college, right? Don't talk nonsense. Huiyudi was so angry that her pretty face turned red. She looked at Linny awkwardly, turned her head and scolded coldly. He's just a teammate I found. Junior sister Jelly, if you say such nonsense again, don't blame me for not considering our relationship as fellow disciples. Jelly frowned and was about to continue mocking, but the tall man standing next to her spoke first. Teammate? Haha, junior sister Yudi, where did you find such a rustic teammate? Is he a native of West Island? I heard that he's always at home serving tea and taking care of children all year round. This is the first time I've seen such a person. Chapter 46-68. Anyone could see the greed in his eyes. From the moment he saw Linny talking to Huiyudi, he already disliked Linny. This was the perfect opportunity to make things difficult for him. Linny frowned slightly when he heard this. Other than Huiyudi, these people were insignificant in his eyes. He was too lazy to pay attention to them. He didn't even bother to look at them. However, if they didn't have eyes and provoked him, then there was nothing much to say. Alright, native teammate, there's nothing for you to do here. You can leave. The tall man directly waved his hand to signal the guest to leave. Other than him, no other man should even think about getting close to Huiyudi. Linny turned his head to look at Huiyudi. He wouldn't get angry because of a few words from this kind of jumping clown. He would either directly ignore it or directly crush it to death. The key was to see what this little girl was going to choose. Huiyudi frowned. Finally, she gritted her teeth and said to Linny, "Let's go." Linny nodded indifferently. These people didn't enter his eyes. Moreover, this was their internal dispute. Linny had no interest in getting involved at all. TSK, senior sister Hua, what do you want me to say? You actually didn't hesitate to fall out with us for a wild man. People said that you're as pure as ice and as clean as jade. Bah, it turns out that you're just a bastard. You really don't even want your face. Carrie immediately mocked and ridiculed mercilessly. What did you say? Huiyudi suddenly turned around and glared at her. Even Linny couldn't bear to listen to this kind of filthy words, let alone a girl like her who valued her reputation and integrity. You know what I'm saying? Since you can do this kind of stupid thing, why can't I say it? If I say, do you want to keep it for yourself? You can't be naive enough to think that you can get what we're looking for by pulling in such a wild man, right? You're simply daydreaming. Carrie continued to taunt and ridicule. When Linny heard this, his heart moved slightly. Listening to these words, could it be that these people also came for the Thunder Shen Vine? Originally, if it was someone unrelated to him, then he really couldn't be bothered to deal with it. But if it was a competitor. Furthermore, he was so arrogant that it would be inexcusable if he didn't do something about it. Huiyudi was about to retort, but Carrie didn't give her a chance. She turned to look at Linny and sneered, "Country bumpkin. I'll give you a piece of advice out of goodwill. This senior marshal brother Ren Zhongyuan is senior marshal sister Hua's suitor. Not only is he very strong but he also has a bad temper. You should be careful. Don't die. As Carrie spoke, the tall man called Ren Zhongyuan cooperated with her and sneered coldly. The gaze he looked at Lin Yi shockingly carried a bit of killing intent. It seemed that if he didn't cooperate, this guy really intended to do something. Unfortunately, this person had obviously found the wrong target. Lin Yi's gaze was much colder and sharper than his. When their gazes met, it was Ren Zhongyuan who subconsciously took a step back. This scene really shocked the others. Ren Zhongyuan was a genius disciple of the East Continent Institute. And in everyone's eyes, Lin Yi was nothing more than a country bumpkin. There was absolutely no comparison between them. Who would have thought that Ren Zhongyuan, the genius of the East Continent, would be scared off by a country bumpkin? Having accidentally made a fool of himself, Ren Zhongyuan immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. At this moment, Lin Yi's cold gaze still fell on his face. He indifferently spat out a sentence, "Trash, you better not waste my time. Otherwise I'll kill you." "What? You actually dare to call me trash? You even said you want to kill me? You're just a country bumpkin, how dare you?" Ren Zhongyuan immediately erupted. The powerful aura of a nascent soul-perfected stage expert instantly poured out without reservation. He was originally an extremely arrogant person. Moreover, right now in front of his sweetheart, Huayudi, how could he possibly admit defeat? The powerful aura caused the surrounding sand and stones to fly, and the wind to howl. It was a terrifying scene filled with murderous intent. However, Lin Yi stood still in the middle of it. He didn't seem to emit any powerful aura, but the surrounding did not affect him at all. He didn't even blink. Huayudi was shocked. She didn't know that Lin Yi had the powerful strength to fight against enemies of a higher level. Killing a profound ascending stage expert was like playing a game. She only knew that Lin Yi's current strength was at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. In front of a person like Ren Zhongyuan, it could be said that he was too weak to withstand a single blow. "Senior brother Ren, stop. If that's the case, let's go together. This senior brother Lin's identity is not trivial. You can't be rude to him." Huayudi hurriedly stood in front of Lin Yi. Once the two sides clashed, in her opinion, Lin Yi would definitely die. In that case, the previous agreement would be in vain. "What? You said that this country bumpkin's background is not small? He's just a country bumpkin, what background can he have?" Jelly curled her lips disapprovingly. "His name is Lin Yi. He's a teammate arranged by my master. His master is an old friend of my master in the North Island, Shanghai Tianhua." Huayudi clenched her teeth and said. Lin Yi glanced at Huayudi in surprise. He estimated that she just thought of a lie in a moment of inspiration. However, in Lin Yi's opinion, it was half true and half false. Her brain turned quite fast. "What? Shanghai Tianhua?" Whether it was Jelly, Ren Zhongyuan, or the other man, they couldn't help but change their expressions when they heard Huayudi's words. Obviously, they had all heard of this top boss of the North Island. However, after Jelly recovered from her shock, she obviously still didn't quite believe it. "Him? He's a disciple of Shanghai Tianhua? Why haven't I heard of him? Didn't you see that he sat with Shangguan Laner at the birthday banquet before? Before entering the teleportation portal just now, Shangguan Laner was still following him. Think about it yourself. If he wasn't the personal disciple of Shanghai Tianhua, would the little princess of the North Island have such a close relationship with him?" Huayudi said seriously. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh inwardly when he heard that. Although it was a cover, it was 90% true. At least it was true that he had been with Shangguan Laner all this time. He didn't expect this girl to be such a master of lying. She was so good at it and no one could see through her lies at all. Sure enough, after hearing Huayudi's words, Ren Zhongyuan and the others had already remembered the scene that they had accidentally glimpsed before. It seemed that Shangguan Laner was beside the person in front of them. In that case, this guy was really a disciple of Shanghai Tianhua. They were the genius disciples of East State College. It was understandable for them to put on a high and mighty attitude when they came out to West Island. After all, the standard of East State was much higher than that of other Heaven Stage islands. However, if the other party was the personal disciple of Shanghai Tianhua, then they were in the wrong place. Chapter 4669. That was because Shangguan Tianhua was one of the top powerhouses of the 5 heaven-ranked islands. Even their backers would have to clasp their hands in greeting when they saw him, to say nothing of juniors like them. "Alright, for the sake of Deputy Island Master Shangguan, I'll bring you along to reap some benefits." Ren Zhongyuan snorted coldly and had to stop bitterly. Deputy Island Master Shangguan? This time it was Lin Yi who was a little stunned. He had been on Heaven Stage Island for so long and had some interactions with Shanghai Tianhua, but he had never heard that this person was actually the Deputy Island Master of the North Island. All along, the North Island had always emphasized the 3 pavilions. From top to bottom, everyone would say that it was the 3 pavilions of the North Island. Under this background, even the Island Master was extremely mysterious, let alone the Deputy Island Master. Everyone knew that Shanghai Tianhua was the Pavilion Master of Soaring Pavilion, but not many people knew about his identity as the Deputy Island Master of the North Island. At least, newcomers like Lin Yi who were inexperienced had never heard of it. Seeing how Ren Zhongyuan and the others looked at him as if they were giving him charity, Lin Yi didn't have the hostility he had before. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, especially Hui Yudi's pleading eyes, Lin Yi's lips curled up slightly, and he nodded non-committally. All right, thanks for the trouble. Although these people were not worth mentioning, if it was not necessary, Lin Yi did not want to have a conflict with the people of the East Continent for the time being. After all, these people had deep backgrounds in various academies. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Lin Yi did not want to make enemies with them. Seeing that Lin Yi was so cooperative, Hui Yudi finally breathed a sigh of relief. From their previous contact, she had already seen that Lin Yi had an indescribable arrogance. Although it was not obvious on the surface, in fact, it was everywhere. She was really afraid that if Lin Yi had a conflict with these people, it would really be out of control. Fortunately, Lin Yi might be arrogant, but he wasn't completely clueless. At least he knew when to yield and when to stand tall. He was not a brainless person. Junior apprentice sister, you die, let's go. Ren Zhongyuan immediately led the way forward. At the same time, he didn't forget to glance back at Lin Yi. I hope you won't be a burden to us. Otherwise, even if you're Vice Island Master Shangguan's personal disciple, it'll be useless. If you die in the trial due to your lack of strength, no one will be able to say anything. Carrie and the other man followed behind her. She also sized up Lin Yi with a profound gaze. With a mocking expression, she said, Hee hee, no wonder senior sister Hua took a fancy to you. So you have such a powerful backer. But still be careful, don't die. Lin Yi shrugged his shoulders indifferently. It seemed that these guys really treated him as a punching bag. Did they really think that he was a pushover? It was fine if nothing happened along the way. Otherwise he might end up kicking an iron plate. Don't take it to heart. They took their anger out on you because of me. I'm sorry. Hui Yudi deliberately walked at the back with Lin Yi and apologized in a low voice. Oh, it doesn't matter to me. Lin Yi replied with a faint smile. And that's good. Seeing that Lin Yi's calm appearance didn't seem to be fake, Hui Yudi's eyes couldn't help but show some appreciation. A look of admiration appeared in Hui Yudi's eyes. Although her strength was far from Ren Zhongyuan's and the others, it was rare to see such an indifferent attitude. Compared to those people, it was obvious who was superior. Forgive me for asking, but are you sure there's no problem with moving with the 3 of them? Lin Yi suddenly asked. His goal with Hui Yudi was the Thunder Shen Ratan. Now, it was obvious that he had disrupted Hui Yudi's original plan and rhythm. If he couldn't obtain the Thunder Shen Ratan like this, he didn't want to waste time with these people. Hui Yudi was also a little hesitant. She said with some hesitation, one more person means one more strength. Moving with them can be said to have advantages and disadvantages. Let's take it one step at a time. If it doesn't work, we'll think of another way. Okay. If that's what you're saying, then I have no objections. Lin Yi nodded. It was obvious that Hui Yudi didn't want to say too much. Her words were ambiguous and he didn't know what she meant. He then asked, oh, by the way, who are they specifically? Although he could infer some identity information from just a few words, it was, after all, not complete. Lin Yi felt that it was necessary to first find out the other party's background. When there was a conflict, it would be convenient for him to weigh the pros and cons and not have too many misgivings. The man in the front is called Ren Zhongyuan. You also heard this. He is a disciple of East Continent's Soaring Cloud Academy. He doesn't have any background in Soaring Cloud Academy, but he is the son of our academy's Grand Chancellor. Speaking of this person, Hui Yudi's eyes clearly showed a bit of disgust. It could be seen that this suitor was really not in her favor. Grand Chancellor? Lin Yi was stunned. He had heard of positions like Grand Chancellor. For example, his old rival Nantian Aurora was the Grand Chancellor of Middle Island's Cultivator Academy. However, this was the first time he had heard of Grand Chancellor. Yes, this is a special position of East Continent's Academy. In terms of authority, it is basically equal to that of the Vice Dean. The two positions both overlap and oppose each other. To a certain extent, the control of the academy is even stronger than that of the vice dean, because all the grand chancellors and students are under the jurisdiction of the grand chancellor. Everything is decided by the grand chancellor. Hui Yudi explained. I see. Lin Yi roughly understood the meaning of this position. It was mostly because East Continent's academy was too powerful, so it was specially set up to balance the power of the academy, so that the vice dean could not cover the sky with one hand. After all, the dean of each academy would not have the mood to personally manage the internal affairs of the academy. The other man is called Yi Xiaotian. He is also a disciple of Soaring Cloud Academy. His uncle is a vice dean of Soaring Cloud Academy. Speaking of this, Hui Yudi suddenly paused. She blushed and said in a mosquito-like voice, he is Jelly's cultivation partner, so he often comes to our academy with Ren Zhongyuan. Cultivation partner? Lin Yi could not help but look at the two of them strangely. Sure enough, Yi Xiaotian's hand was restlessly groping Jelly's body. He dared to do such a thing in front of them. He was really a weirdo. However, this brat might not necessarily be uninterested in Hui Yudi. Although his reaction was not as big as Ren Zhongyuan's, his gaze towards Hui Yudi was clearly filled with lust. Eating from the bowl and looking at the pot, this was a common problem of young masters. As for junior sister Jelly, her full name is Yao Jelly. She is the granddaughter of our Morning Pride Academy's vice dean. Hui Yudi suddenly looked at Lin Yi with a deep meaning, then continued to say, the secular world girl that I told you about before, only ended up like this because she offended her. Chapter 4670. No wonder I don't like her. Lin Yi's eyes turned cold. No matter who the secular world girl was, no matter if she was his confidant or not, he had already blacklisted Yao Jelly. Although he didn't plan to deal with her for now, if there was a chance, Lin Yi didn't mind pushing the boat along. Hui Yudi's gaze towards Yao Jelly from behind was not very friendly either. Both of them had the vice headmaster of Morning Pride Academy behind them, and their competitive relationship was fierce, so they had never been on good terms. Especially after the secular world girl incident, the two of them almost fell out, and there were already signs of them breaking up in public. Otherwise, as fellow disciples of Morning Pride Academy, their relationship wouldn't be so bad. Junior sister Yudi, when did you meet him? How come I didn't know? At this time, Ren Zhongyuan, who was walking in front, suddenly took a few steps back and came over. He was obviously jealous of Lin Yi and Hui Yudi's conversation. My master and his master are old friends, is it strange that we know each other? Hui Yudi replied with a cold face. But I've never heard you mention it before, why did you suddenly come out this time? Ren Zhongyuan still didn't give up. Senior brother Ren, there are many things you don't know about me. Hui Yudi's tone was stiff, and she was clearly a little impatient with this guy, almost falling out with him. Haha, you're right, that's why I want to know more about you, junior sister Yudi. Ren Zhongyuan, on the other hand, didn't seem to be aware of it at all. He continued to smile as he glanced at Lin Yi discreetly. As long as he didn't let the two of them whisper to each other, he'd have achieved his goal. Hui Yudi looked at him and didn't reply, but Ren Zhongyuan wouldn't give up so easily. The other person's attitude was cold, but he still didn't get tired of it. This kind of dogskin plaster was a match for Kong Ming. As for Lin Yi, ever since Ren Zhongyuan came over, he simply kept his mouth shut, as if he really had become a follower. In reality, if not for the Thunder Shen Vine, he couldn't be bothered to travel with these people. The five of them continued forward. After walking out of the mouth of the canyon, the front suddenly opened up. Lin Yi originally thought that this was at most a small island, but the scene in front of him shocked him. This was actually a desert. It wasn't a pure desert. Patches of vegetation could still be seen here and there, but at least 80% of what they could see was barren land. It wasn't to say that there wasn't an inch of grass, but it gave off a feeling of death. Ever since they arrived at Heaven Stage Island, every time he went on an adventure or a trial, Lin Yi would basically spend his time in a lush, primitive forest. He did not expect that this time would be an exception. What surprised him even more was that this undulating desert was boundless. It didn't feel like an isolated island in Zhonghai at all. Lin Yi was a little surprised, but his companions didn't seem surprised at all, as if they already knew about it. Thinking about it carefully, it wasn't strange. Morning Pride Academy was a purely female academy, and it had a close relationship with West Island. In the past, even if the trial of West Island was not open to the public, it was not necessarily forbidden for them, so it was normal to know about it in advance. After walking out of the mouth of the canyon, they couldn't see the other trial takers around. These people were all here for the treasures of heaven and earth. Acting separately was the minimum principle. Otherwise, if everyone gathered together, they would have to kill each other when they found some treasures of heaven and earth. That situation was obviously not what they wanted to see. It was not only inefficient but also stupid. Wait, let's determine the route, Ren Zhongyuan suddenly said. Then he took out a map from his arms. Lin Yi glanced at it from a distance. It should be a map of an island, but this island was obviously much larger than he expected. In terms of area alone, it should be comparable to those big islands in the South Sea. Yi Xiaotian, who was touching Yao Jelly in front, took out a compass from his backpack when he heard this. It looked very exquisite from a distance, and one could faintly feel the fluctuation of a profound formation. This should be a rare high-grade product on the market. No wonder he was the son of East Continent Academy, his equipment was really advanced. The two compared the map with the compass and soon determined the direction. Ren Zhongyuan pointed to a higher hillside in front of the left and said, "Go that way." Ren Zhongyuan took the lead again, and Yi Xiaotian and Yao Jelly followed closely. Hui Yudi frowned, opened her mouth slightly but did not speak and followed the three people. Did they really come for the Thunder Xian Ratan? Lin Yi couldn't help but feel troubled. Looking at how serious they were, it was obvious that they'd prepared for this. If that was the case, would his promise with Hui Yudi still be valid? Lin Yi frowned thoughtfully. Looking at the attitude of Ren Zhongyuan and others, he knew that they would definitely not share this rare treasure of heaven and earth with him, and even Hui Yudi might not get much. After all, it seemed that they were incompatible just now. If it really came to that point, they would inevitably fall out. At that time, should he continue to cooperate with Hui Yudi, or simply find a chance to directly take it? After all, if they really fought, the previous agreement would have nothing to do with it. No matter what he did, there was nothing wrong with it. Lin Yi followed them while calculating in his heart. Ren Zhongyuan and others were unaware of this. A mere burden of the early nascent soul stage was nothing in their eyes. These masters of the great perfection of the nascent soul stage did not even put him in their eyes. They did not know that they had become the prey of others. At this moment, they were still immersed in their arrogance and could not extricate themselves. Ren Zhongyuan led the way in front. The five people trekked in the desert for half an hour. Not to mention any crisis along the way, they did not even see a living creature. The scene in front of them was the same. Except for the desert, there was more desert. The only slight change was the terrain. Following the route pointed by the map, everyone found that the terrain under their feet was getting higher and higher. It was originally just a slowly undulating hillside, but now it had become a towering mountain range. The road ahead gradually became narrow, and on both sides were bottomless canyons. However, a desert was a desert after all. Even if the terrain was strange, the scene was really not good to look at. This kind of dull feeling was completely different from the expected crisis. Everyone even couldn't help but have the same doubt. How could there be treasures of heaven and earth in this place? However, things had already come to this point, everyone could only continue to move forward, praying that this time they would not return empty-handed. Otherwise, all the feelings they had been looking forward to for so long would be wasted. Suddenly, there was a trace of inexplicable warning in Lin Yi's heart. The jade pendant sounded at the same time, and his face immediately changed. He quickly stopped and at the same time, pulled Hui Yudi, who was not far in front of him. Chapter 4671. You. Hui Yudi subconsciously whispered. She didn't expect that Lin Yi, who had always been well-behaved and could even be said to be impatient with her, would suddenly make a move. However, before she could finish speaking, there was a sudden change in front of them. More than a dozen vines as thick as buckets suddenly soared from the ground, with a terrifying sound of breaking through the air. They swept towards the direction of the crowd at a speed that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye. Because of the previous repetition, everyone was more or less careless at the moment, and the attack of these giant vines was so sudden and so fierce that Ren Zhongyuan, Yi Xiaotian, and Yao Jelly, who were walking at the front, had no chance to react at all, and were instantly hit by these vines. Only Lin Yi, who was already vigilant, and Hui Yudi, who was pulled by him, barely escaped this disaster. However, Ren Zhongyuan and the other two were masters of the Yuaning stage after all. Even if they were caught off guard and could not avoid it, they still made a response in a hurry. At the moment when they were attacked by this giant vine, Ren Zhongyuan and Yi Xiaotian were covered with a layer of golden true energy at the same time. The vine seemed to be unable to shake the defense of this layer of golden true energy, giving Lin Yi the feeling that it was like the legendary golden bell cover. As for Yao Jelly, although she was not as rigid as Ren Zhongyuan and Yi Xiaotian, her movement technique was extremely flexible. Her whole body twisted quickly like a water snake. At the last moment she was barely able to avoid her vital parts, but she was inevitably scratched a little, not to mention that she was wearing a cyan soft armor, so this power was still bearable. Seeing this, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows slightly. Although her character was not good, there was no doubt about her strength. She was worthy of being an elite master from the East Continent Academy. If it was replaced by other masters of the Yuanying stage, they may not be able to make such a timely response. However, the three of them were still covered in dirt. They were almost knocked down into the valley by these giant vines just now, and were instantly whipped back. After retreating a distance with great difficulty, they stared at the giant vines in front of them that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. What is this thing? While everyone was shocked, Huiyuti couldn't help but look at Lin Yi. If it weren't for Lin Yi pulling her, she would definitely be like Ren Zhongyuan and the other two at the moment. She would not be injured, but she would definitely be very embarrassed. Everyone carefully retreated while carefully observing the giant vines that had appeared out of thin air. What was surprising was that such a large number of giant vines actually grew from the same root system. In other words, such an earth-shattering momentum actually came from the same plant. Lin Yi looked at the bottom of this terrible plant. Previously, it was difficult to detect because it was hidden in the sand, but at this moment, it was clearly seen that its huge roots had firmly penetrated into the entire mountain, completely blocked the road. How can there be such a strange plant? Seeing that the giant vines were about to attack again, Yao Jelly couldn't help but exclaim in horror. Everyone also couldn't help but look at each other. Just now they felt that it was boring, but now it was really fun. From the moment of exchange just now, they could feel that this giant vine monster's strength was at least above the Yuanying stage. Even if they joined forces, they didn't have much chance of winning against this strange existence. Huiyuti retreated to a safe distance and carefully observed for a while. Suddenly she said, "This is a dummy vine, a vine monster that has become a spirit. I've seen it in an ancient book before." Upon hearing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but be a little surprised. He had seen all kinds of powerful spirit beasts, but plants were very rare. However, it wasn't that he had never seen them before. At least, there were similar existences in the mountains behind the North Island. During that trip to Half Moon Lake, if it weren't for the ghost that deterred it, Lin Yi would have already become a pile of fertilizer. Although Lin Yi's strength at that time was much lower than now, his intuition told him that although the dummy vine in front of him was strong, it was far from being comparable to the monster in the mountains behind the North Island. After all, the entire Half Moon Lake was the body of that guy. Even the ghost couldn't do anything to it, and the dummy vine in front of him was obviously not at that level. Lin Yi evaluated in his heart. Judging from the fight between Ren Zhongyuan and the others and the dummy vine just now, with his strength he should be able to kill the dummy vine, but with the strength of the others, it was not so easy to say. That's right, I remember. After listening to Huiyuti's words, Yi Xiaotian suddenly shouted, "This is the ancient battlefield, and there are remnants of artistic conception and spiritual energy everywhere. After the plants here absorb it, it is very likely that there will be a mutation. That's how the dummy vine came about. I'm afraid that it doesn't just absorb artistic conception and spiritual energy. Maybe even the remnant spirit of the battlefield will be swallowed by it. Otherwise, how can it become such a terrible monster?" Ren Zhongyuan said with a look of fear. It was pure luck that he wasn't injured just now. His protective golden bell was almost smashed by the giant vine. If that really happened, the consequences would be unimaginable. Then what should we do? Yao Jelly became more and more frightened. Among the three of them, she was the most embarrassed. The shock that the dummy vine brought to her was naturally far more profound than the others. She immediately panicked and said, "We want to pick the long roots, so this is the only way, right?" Ren Zhongyuan's face suddenly changed, and he glared at Yao Jelly fiercely. It seemed that he was very angry with her for revealing the purpose of their trip. Yao Jelly reacted. There were not only the three of them present. Huiyuti was fine, but there was also an outsider, Lin Yi, behind them. Forget it, it doesn't matter if that kid knows. Anyway, it has nothing to do with him. Yi Xiaotian mediated for her. In fact, Lin Yi was only at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. They didn't put him in their eyes at all. For the sake of Shanghai Tianhua's reputation, they could just give him some things. If he really dared to ask for rare treasures, then they would teach him how to behave. While the three of them were talking, Linny couldn't help but secretly whisper, "What was this long route?" But in this way, the purpose of these three people was not the same as that of Huoyuti. That was to say, they didn't know that Huoyuti was going to find the Thunder Shen Vine? Thinking about it carefully, it was normal. Although they were in the same school, the fierce competition could be said to be incompatible like fire and water. It was impossible to achieve a real sense of mutual exchange, especially when it came to strategic-level treasures like the Thunder Shen Vine. Huoyuti could probably know it from Lu Ziyu, the master who was on good terms with West Island. People like Ren Zhongyuan might not have this way. R1152. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.